rank cannot be ignored and must be respected for nothing else other than that alone. You shall receive your implants after we have our meals, he said seriously, and then offered a small but sincere smile. Now, I believe the door must be opened. Wyatt blinked, blushed in embarrassment, and quickly turned to open the door for Commander Redford. Following the imposing man, he felt a tinge of respect blossom within him. The mess hall was full and divided into three segments. The largest one was for the regular commoners who served as pilots, general staff, servicemen, and general enlisted personnel. The second section was for officers and their aides, as well as other lieutenants, squadron leaders, ensigns, and the only place a commoner could ever enter if he achieved the rank of warrant officer, the lowest rank allowed in such a section. The third section was meant for senior and commanding officers and was, of course, a closed-off section filled with their own private chefs and rations. As a lieutenant, he couldn't enter that section and followed Redford until a pair of security guards opened the doors for him. With a single nod from him, Wyatt saluted and went on to take his place on the small line formed before the buffet. Like usual, none talked to him, and they all set their silent, judging eyes upon him. At least they leave me alone, he thought as he served himself a piece of steak, various vegetables, and a helping of mashed potatoes. If there's one thing I can say I am glad it improved, that's the food. No more gruel, tasteless pills, and awful ration bars for a little while. Now, where will I... Oh, spoke too soon. This was going to happen sooner or later, he thought as he turned around, searching for a table and seeing a trio of well-uniformed men, also lieutenants, walking up to him. Their gray eyes revealed their implants, and their smug expressions gave away that they were nobles. In any other place, I would assume they were bastard children or the last in line, but in here, I'm not sure. When the trio stopped just a meter in front of him, he spoke in a practiced tone that conveyed veiled submission and respect. How may I be of service? You can start by telling us what really happened, commoner. The red-haired leader of the trio, the tallest and bulkiest, spat with eyes that showed nothing but contempt. How many lies did you tell to trick his majesty that you could be anything worthwhile? None. Technically untrue, but also technically true, Wyatt replied without losing his tone. I was merely able to provide assistance to Commander Redford's vessels at a dire time. I expected no reward, but I was rewarded nonetheless. It seems this commoner speaks with some sense, the shorter, fatter of the trio said, while the last member, a lanky but nimble-looking man, glared at him. But now he thinks he can share our space. Disgraceful, the lanky man said, his glare intensifying. Even if I wasn't rewarded, he replied, careful not to say promoted, despite how much he wanted to shove it in their faces. I was a warrant officer, and, according to regulations, warrant officers are allowed to dine in this section. If my presence offend you, lords, I shall leave. The red-haired man smirked. At least you know your place. Very well, commoner scum. I shall forgive your transgressions if you do one simple task for me. His smirk widened. Bark, like the lowly dog you are. Is this blue-blood idiot for real? Wyatt thought, bemused. Oh, he is serious. How far is he up his own ass? No matter, he thought before clearing his throat. Bark! 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 Wyatt barked as best he could without a shred of shame in doing so. The three nobles were stunned, along with the rest of the mess hall watching the confrontation proceeding. He noticed some were stunned cold, others groaned, disappointed that there would be no blood involved, and the rest simply didn't care enough to spare more than a few seconds of their attention. The three nobles, though, began to laugh. They laughed for several moments until Wyatt spoke up. Will that be all, lords? Leave our sight, mongrel, the red-haired one ordered. A moment later, the trio left without another word directed at him, but were now celebrating the humiliation they dished out. Fools, he whispered to himself in a tone so low he barely heard it, while a triumphant smirk adorned his lips. Searching for an empty table, he sat and began to enjoy his meal, unaware that other eyes had been set on him since the moment he entered the mess hall. Chapter 5. Wyatt came to a quick conclusion after receiving his 3 scheduled implants. The process was puzzlingly quick, but the pain was something he was not willing to deal with voluntarily in the future. Due to the limitations of the medical wing and the current state, he wouldn't be receiving his cybernetic eyes, which suited him just fine, and he was in no hurry to replace his perfectly functioning natural eyes. Nor would he receive a direct uplink to the main net frame. But he didn't care about that one, since that particular implant needed either the cybernetic eyes or go through the gene-enhancing program that was available only to the highest echelons of society in the Principality. The implants he did receive were impactful, and he wobbled with every step he took. The first was a series of nano-injectors that now laced his vertebrae and would, over a few hours, make their way to his brain. The injectors would then be ready to dull pain, enhance his reaction time, and combat neurotoxins should that be needed. The second implant was the one he was currently hating the most. At the back of his skull now sat a small biomechanical chip that would allow Commander Redford, or whoever the commanding officer at the time was, to deliver him orders and instructions. He could feel the chip wriggling into position, slowly growing to prevent rejection, and was now messing with his ears, dulling his sense of stability and cutting his hearing range by a significant amount as it latched itself in order to provide its benefits. In short, it was a sort of long-range, one-way radio. He could receive orders but couldn't reply in turn since he wasn't connected to the network. As long as the distance didn't exceed more than 100 kilometers from the nearest network access point, that is. The third implant, though, was the main reason why he would not ever take any further implantations if he could help it. Sure, the first two hurt in their own unique ways. His back was killing him, and the nasty headache he was going through did him no favors. But the last one was in a league of its own. Similarly to the nano-injectors on his back, the third implant followed that same process. But instead of connecting with his brain and limiting itself to his column, the rest of his body was the objective. Well, not his whole body, just his bones. A subdermal implant was inserted in his chest, as close as possible to his aorta. Thanks to the local anesthesia and the quick, precise motions of the robotic unit performing the seconds-long surgery, he didn't feel a thing, and his wound was closed a moment later with biofoam. The scar would be gone in just a few days at most. The pain, though, made itself known half an hour later. It began like an itch he couldn't quite scratch, but all over his body and underneath his skin. Then it increased until every step was agony as it rippled across his whole body. It felt like getting pricked by a needle, but unlike a single stab that was barely painful, annoying, and quick to pass, he was enduring hundreds of them at the same time with every movement he made. Even breathing is a struggle, he muttered, as he continued to wobble his way around the hangar, only occasionally hearing the snickering of technicians, mechanics, and the odd pilot that made their way there. I understand that the ship doesn't have the facilities to do this in private, but their staring is not helping my mood one bit, he thought with annoyance, as a fresh wave of pain coursed through his body. He couldn't even hate or blame the medic in charge for anything. She had warned him of what he was to expect and what he needed to do for the implants to take full root. That was the main reason he couldn't sit down or lay on his bed, trying to be still as a corpse in an attempt to lessen the pain. And why he couldn't take painkillers either. He had to endure the process fully awake and on constant move, which, as he was reminded again as he nearly tumbled to the ground for the 7th time since his arrival, his hatred for the second implant increased. The pain of having his bones suffer microfractures every second only to be sealed and put back together almost instantly, he could handle. It wasn't enough to make him scream, but it was a ticking, maddening constant that he couldn't help but wince, groan, and clench his teeth in response to it. But the sensation of impending vertigo and his impaired balance, making it impossible to keep a steady posture or any semblance of rhythm? Yes, he hated the second implant with a passion. As he finished another round, he noticed a vaguely familiar figure enter the hangar. Her red armor and blue hair gave her away as she approached in his direction. The few staring crew members made themselves scarce at her sight, opting to admire her from a safer distance. Damn, what was her name again? Juliana? No, that's her sister, right? Come on, think. Damn this headache. Her name started with a C, I think? Cecilia? Celestine? Cynthia! Yes, her name was Cynthia Winfield. He mentally patted himself on the back for remembering just in time before the blue-haired woman said something he couldn't quite catch. Her voice was still pleasant to hear, but distorted thanks to the implant. Not to be disrespectful, he began, voice entirely too loudly, and stopped for a moment to face her. Grave mistake. As the moment he stopped moving, he felt as if the ground was about to become the ceiling the wall, and his feet his arms. With a mighty groan, he pushed himself to the side, catching himself before he fell, and continued walking. Pain rocked his senses, and he gritted his teeth hard in protest, but he succeeded. The sensation of vertigo lessened, and now he could wobble in peace again. After a few seconds, he spoke up as he noticed the blue-haired woman looking at him with a hint of pity and understanding in her sapphire blue eyes. Sorry about that. The implants won't allow me to follow protocol for now, he apologized. How may I? A pained groan cut him off. Be of service? Breathe deeply and don't fight the pain. You're straining yourself that way. Calm, deep breaths. Let your lungs do the heavy lifting, Lieutenant Staples, Cynthia replied, as she walked beside him and spoke louder than usual so he could hear her voice. Wyatt did as instructed, though it was difficult, and the first attempt made his entire ribcage protest in anger. But he didn't give up and continued. It took the better part of 5 minutes until breathing no longer hurt, and much to his joy, the pain lessened considerably. Another 5 minutes later, his vertigo also diminished, most of his hearing returned, and the headache was not as prevalent as before. During that time, Cynthia walked silently at his side as a regal pillar of unshakable duty, and her advice was greatly welcomed by Wyatt, now that he reaped the benefits of it. Thank you, Lady Cynthia. I feel much better now. I suspect that given the condition I found you, you were not told the proper physical steps to aid you in the implant adjustment period, she stated, as a matter of fact. Wyatt nodded lightly. I wasn't aware there were any to begin with, Lady Cynthia. I was merely told that I needed to keep moving and that I shouldn't take painkillers. Again, I thank you for your aid. To his surprise, he saw her stoic face turn into a displeased one, frown and all. I will report this immediately. Such gross oversight cannot go unnoticed. She closed her eyes for 2 seconds, then opened them again, her expression returning to the picture of professional neutrality. It has been done. Did she actually do it, or is she just pulling my leg? He asked himself, but put it to the side in favor of her previous aid. I thank you, Lady Cynthia, but won't you get in trouble for it? I may not be a part of the military structure as I hold no official rank, but as Princess Clara's bodyguard, my position stands above many in terms of importance and weight. Protocol must be followed for order to exist, and its structure must be respected in due turn. You are a Lieutenant Wyatt Staples before you're a commoner, and your rank was insulted by the denial of proper medical insight and exercises, and thus you suffered more pain and discomfort than necessary. I can assure you I will not be punished for exposing such gross incompetence, she replied with a stern, serious tone. Oh, shit. Color me pleasantly surprised. Another noble worth her title, though she's a stickler for rules, too. Now I understand why she protested about Woodshaft's smuggling operations. I wonder if Princess Clara has any influence in her attitude and views, he wondered before giving her a faint nod. In that case, I thank you for your aid, Lady Cynthia. You may call me by my name, Lieutenant Wyatt. My princess has bestowed the courtesy of extending you her hand in friendship, and the use of her name without honorifics. You saved my life as well, so I offer the same courtesy, she revealed with a hint of humility. Despite everything, Wyatt couldn't stop a smile from spreading on his lips. Without so much pain clouding his mind and being able to think more or less properly again without the headache, his awkwardness returned as well as a clear reminder of his position. In that case, Cynthia, you may call me by my name, too. Very well, she replied, and suddenly turned on her heel in a swift, clean motion that would have put a ballerina to shame with how smooth it was despite her bulky armor. Follow me. My princess wishes to speak to you in private. Commander Redford has been informed, and you have been granted leave until my princess says otherwise. I obey, he replied in the common answer expected to give to a noble issuing an order outside the military branches. And here I thought I would never speak to her again. I wonder what she wants from me. Wyatt followed Cynthia at an even pace, never stopping his controlled, steady breathing. The trip took no more than a few minutes until they made it to one of the commander's quarters, which served as the temporary room for the princess. Outside the door stood 2 black, meter-tall cylinders, He watched as the bodyguard put her hand on her and then introduced a long, complicated code. When she was done, the cylinders turned white and the doors opened. Wyatt advanced access to the room. He raised an eyebrow in confusion. Enter, Wyatt, Cynthia ordered. You're not coming in? He asked, just to make sure his assumptions were not mistaken. Clara wishes to speak with you in private, she replied, and said nothing more. Wyatt nodded, and a ball of iron suddenly manifested itself in his stomach. He'd heard stories and other gossip that when a commoner was invited to a noble's room in private, it was for one of three things: murder, sexual reasons, or simple amusement. He wasn't one to believe such hearsay, but now he wasn't so sure about it. Still, he stepped into the lavishly ample room with just some trepidation seeping through his otherwise practiced mask. 3 steps into the room, the door behind him closed with a rasp of metal and a hiss, sealing it behind him. The ball of iron turned into a veritable pit, and he began to sweat nervously. The room was quite ample, he had to admit. There was a large bed on the other end, a large private bathroom to his right, and expensive pieces of furniture set about the place. But his focus was on the blonde woman sitting on a chair in front with a small circular desk set before her, holding a few confectionery treats and a violet liquid he wasn't sure what it was. Ah, Wyatt, please come sit. I wish to discuss a few things with you, Clara said, offering him a sincere, friendly smile. The pit shrank in since, but didn't leave him. Okay, Wyatt, play it cool and try not to get murdered. Don't say anything stupid or offensive, and you may walk out of this in one piece. A noble is already dangerous. Royalty? Doubly so, he thought as he obeyed and sat on the available chair. Immediately after, small electrical shocks erupted all across his back, arms, and legs, but they were not unpleasant. If anything, the pain was further reduced and was now only mildly annoying. Seeing his puzzled expression, Clara giggled. I am aware of your current condition, Wyatt. The Dolaxis, Ontoro, and Kinator implants are some of the worst there are. Necessary, but bothersome to deal with. That chair is specially designed to allow your body to work on its own while you are seated. It doesn't replace physical activity, but it makes it far more tolerable for some time. Wyatt bowed his head. I thank you for your benevolence, Clara. How may I be of service? I wish to know more about you, Wyatt. Without access to your records, I'm afraid I know nothing more than what you can tell and show, she said before sipping from her drink. Do help yourself to some desserts. They are delectable, I can assure you. Don't mind if I do, he thought, as he reached for a small round thing covered in white fudge and topped with some sort of red fruit. He ate it, and his eyes widened as the explosion of flavor overwhelmed his taste buds, and only by sheer will of restraint he stopped himself from scarfing down the entire plate of good stuffs. He munched on the offered treat slowly, savoring the exquisite sweet thing in his mouth. When he swallowed, a satisfied sigh escaped his lips. What are these? He asked, enamored with the sweet things. Cake, a small version of them. There are also cookies, scones, and chocolate bits. The glass is filled with grape juice, she replied gently. Go on. You can eat as much as you desire. I might just do that. What in the blazes is grape juice, cake, and chocolate? He asked himself before taking 2 of each treat with as much humility as he could muster. As much as he wanted to abuse the princess's goodwill in this particular subject, he knew better. I'm an open book, Clara. What do you wish to know of me, though I assure you I am not remotely interesting in any way? I shall be the judge of that, Wyatt, Clara replied before eating a small piece of chocolate. Tell me, where are you from? I'm from Volantis, Your Majesty. A little colony of no importance in the territory belonging to House Gimor under the supervision of Baron Carlos Arante, bordering Caiston territory, actually. To be specific, I was born and raised in Volantis's capital city, Fire. My family is of little note. My father is an electrical engineer and my mother is a social worker. I have 2 younger brothers, one of whom followed our father's footsteps and the other became a Clixal hunter. He replied honestly. Clara tilted her head slightly. What is a Clixal? It is an avian-like creature, 3 meters tall, fierce, durable, and quick creatures, but stupid. They are a constant problem to the agricultural areas of the planet as they breed extremely fast and eat all sorts of livestock while destroying crops in the process. he replied, before eating a cookie and taking a sip of grape juice. Is this what royalty eats regularly? I wouldn't mind groveling at her feet if it means I get to eat these things every now and again. And the juice? It is the best drink I've ever tasted, he thought giddily, his nervousness all but eradicated, and the pit in his stomach replaced by a longing for more of those tasty, sweet treats. It was as if he hadn't eaten at all in the mess hall. Clara sipped on her juice, nodding twice. I see. How old are you and how were you raised? I'm 21 years old, and I guess I was raised as best as my parents could afford, he said, unsure. We rarely went hungry, and only when the taxes were raised for short periods of time. I received the standard education available to all commoners, and once I was 14, I enlisted in the Royal Navy as a pilot. I spent the following years at the academy preparing to be a pilot, and I was good enough to achieve the rank of warrant officer. When I graduated, I was dispatched to the 3rd Fleet, 2nd Frontier Corps, and stationed on the lingering systems as a garbage hauler, he explained simply and politely before eating another cake. How was your time in the academy? Was it enjoyable? Were you mistreated? She asked, her friendly smile dropping slightly. Wyatt felt the instant shift in the atmosphere and straightened involuntarily. The purple eyes of the princess were fixed on him, and he suddenly felt like he was being studied. I do not know what to reply to that, Clara, he replied. What the hell? Why would she care about something like that? I thought she was going to ask about my records or anything besides that. What is she playing at? He thought, setting aside his treats for the time being. I enlisted because I had always wished to become a pilot and see the stars while serving the principality. My time at the academy was irrelevant to me. I mean, I wasn't treated like most other commoners, so I can't complain too much, I guess. I also can't say that I was mistreated. Sure, there were incidents that required a report, but they went unsolved, and I ignored anything after that, he replied. But inside, he spat with disdain at the memory of the many incidents that tarnished his otherwise exemplary record. Clara kept quiet for several seconds, sipping more of her juice and eating 2 cookies in the process. When she spoke again, she did so in an even, serious tone. Then I assume being ordered to bark like a dog in the middle of a mess hall is considered something to be ignored? For the first time in many years, Wyatt felt his measured and perfectly crafted mask of indifferent servitude falter slightly, and he answered with a frown. Compared to what other nobles usually do? Yes, he replied, and then relaxed. Princess Clara, I'm a commoner. It is the duty of every commoner to obey the orders of a noble, and can only reject them under orders of another of higher standing or from another house or lineage. If you were to order me to, say, drop on all fours and act as an animal for your entertainment, I will do so without hesitation. Clara nodded. Indeed, I could order you to do that, and more shameful things, Wyatt. Be safe to know that I shan't. Unlike those nobles that stand below the garbage you used to haul, I have learned respect towards others, she explained, and her friendly demeanor returned. Though I must say, while it was quite amusing to see you thoroughly humiliate them, I would have preferred it had been done through other means and not see you risk your dignity. Surprised by her words, Wyatt swallowed as he offered a small smile. One must do as one can, Clara. Clara rolled her eyes and waved a hand in dismissal. Please, Wyatt, I want to know the real you, not this proper and cordial veneer you portray. Speak your mind freely and without restriction. Think of me as nothing more than a friend, as I will do the same. None can hear us. This conversation shall not be known to anyone but us. I promise you, you will not be punished or held accountable for anything you say. If this is a test, then I can't see where it bends, he thought, smiling more. Who would have thought that a princess freaking royalty would be so approachable? The respect he had for Clara upon their meeting increased, and he allowed himself to relax once more, careful to retain his breathing rhythm. In that case, Clara, I shall be sincere. I was not afraid to risk my dignity because I have none. Or rather, I care not for it as well as I care not about pride or shame. If I can win by sacrificing something that is worthless to me, then I will happily do so. Clara nodded, sipping from her drink again. Unlike the fools who thought they humiliated you and proudly preened their feathers as if they had achieved something, you showed their incompetence and stupidity. Rest assured, they will be punished for their conduct, but not directly. No surprises there. He I am surprised that you have not expressed worry for the well-being of your family, said the princess. When His Majesty, the prince, showed me the map, I managed to glimpse that House Guimore chose to remain neutral in this conflict. Guimores have a reputation for being opportunistic. I'm sure they will declare themselves for a side once a clear upper hand is held by one side, he replied calmly, not allowing the bit of worry in his heart to show. Clara tilted her head slightly and pushed a finger up against her chin. You don't seem terribly bothered about the coup, Wyatt. Wyatt chuckled darkly, his eyes drifting to the cup in his hand. What other choice do I have? The last great conflict in the Principality was more than 400 years ago. Another coup, unsuccessful but bloody. Trust me, Clara, I am terrified. I will do everything the prince orders me in order to prevent another civil war. But at the end of the day, I'm just a commoner with no power, say, or means to do anything by myself. Not that it matters if I was a noble or even royalty. We are in this conflict together, and the sooner Duke Draymore is put down, the better, he replied sincerely, but internally, he was fuming. Nobles die trying to keep their riches or increase their status and reach. If they can't win, they'll flee. But they always use the lives of the people they are supposed to be in charge of protecting for their own means, and don't care if we have to die in droves as long as it means they win something out of it. Clara's expression fell, and her smile was replaced by a sad one. That is a grim and unfortunate view on things, Wyatt? Wyatt shrugged. Maybe. But it is also true, and the only view a commoner can have. At least I am in the Navy and can fight back. Most won't have a chance to do anything at all. It is sad that what you say is true, Wyatt. The Principality has changed since its founding, and not always in the ways that mattered, it hurts me to say. Prince Julius Astor would be ashamed of what has become of it if he were to see it today. Doubly so in the case of his progeny. Clara let out a mournful sigh. Thank you for humoring me, Wyatt. You may now leave, and please, take every treat with you. I have more so they won't be missed. Wyatt stood up slowly, bowed his head, and obeyed with gusto the order given to him, gathering all the sweet, sweet treats on his pocket handkerchief. I obey, he said, and a second later the doors opened. Cynthia stood by the entrance waiting for him to exit. They exchanged a curt salute and he left. A moment later, Cynthia entered the room and the doors closed again. Cynthia let out a tired sigh and her expression relaxed. Well, he is unlike what I expected, which is a good thing. He tries to portray himself as someone cordial and straightforward, but he is quite selective about what he says and how to express his thoughts. A cunning man, Clara replied, lips curling up into a smile. He is as valiant as I thought, though, and has a good heart. His loyalty, however, is questionable. Do you believe he may be a potential traitor, turncoat, or spy in disguise, Clara? Cynthia asked. Clara shook her head gently. He is no spy, nor do I believe he could be at any point. He's too honest. A turncoat or traitor? Unlikely. I also doubt he'll run away when a chance presents itself to him. His heart beams with the light of a true knight. His actions that culminated in our salvation are proof of it. I'll keep an eye on him, Cynthia replied. What about the trash? Redford has been informed. Those three idiots did it in front of everyone. He shall punish them accordingly, I am certain. Another sip of juice was soon followed by a pleased sigh escaping her lips. However, I am interested in what he can do as a pilot. Cynthia nodded. His unorthodox tactic drove that black ship away. As Redford stated, a man of his talent was wasted in such a posting. He has already prepared a series of simulations to gauge Lieutenant Wyatt's capabilities. Inform Redford that I wish to see Wyatt in action. The fleet shall travel to Gintrax once we are in range to do so. Resupply should be done within 4 hours, and we shall have 3 days of travel until we can leave. Plenty of time to see if his tactic was a fluke, or if there is true talent beneath his actions, Clara replied. Cynthia sighed tiredly, and her judging eyes fell upon her friend. You just want an excuse to watch dogfights, don't you? Clara blushed. Shush, you. Chapter 6. To say that Wyatt was nervous would be an understatement. After his talk with Princess Clara, he enjoyed a few hours of mostly restful respite while enjoying delicious sweets and snacks that filled his heart with delight. Slowly but surely, the pain started to diminish, and his senses returned to normal scant hours, after the resupply was completed, just in time for him to enjoy a restful sleep. Right after coming out of the shower, a voice coming from nowhere startled him. It was Commander Redford speaking directly to him through the Ontoro implant, as the princess called the second implant he received, now fully integrated into his cranium and ears. Lieutenant Wyatt, it seems the procedure was a success according to my readings. We shall perform a short test. Indicate to the ship's AI that you copied my message. Wyatt did so, and a few seconds later he heard Redford reply. Splendid. Report within an hour to the training area. That was all Redford said to him, a direct order with no room for debate or misinterpretation. What he didn't understand was why his commander would want to visit the chambers so early. He usually tends to his duties, sensor sweeps, and files some reports, and then exercises. I thought for sure Commander Redford was a man who stuck to a given schedule. Guess I was wrong, he muttered, while making his way to the large room dedicated to simulated training. When he arrived, he saw that all the chambers were empty but ready to be used. Also, 20 large monitors were now hanging from the ceiling. The monitors themselves displayed 20 spots that listed 20 names, his being among them. He turned to his commanding officer with a look of utter bemusement, even as nervousness ate away at his senses. Commander Redford, why am I listed up there? He asked, dumbly. Redford turned his head Wyatt's way before answering. Are you not familiar with the training scores? Wyatt nodded. I am, Commander. It's just that back at the Academy, that competition was reserved for prominent nobles depending on their paths and specializations. Right. I forgot how the Academy tends to operate. Most fleets and Royal Command like to be more pragmatic in that approach. As commander of the fighter division, it is my duty and responsibility to oversee the capabilities of those I judge to be my best pilots and pit them against each other in a friendly competition. Ideally, 15 nobles and 5 commoners fill the 20 available spots. This time, though, only 3 commoners with sufficient promise are available to me. You are one of them, Mr. Staples. He finished with a barely perceptible grin. Oh, you have got to be kidding me. Couldn't you have asked me first or something? Wyatt shouted in his mind, nervousness making his innards shift with discomfort. The Academy was one thing, but he was likely going to face experienced fighter pilots, most of them damnable blue bloods, and get thoroughly humiliated in turn. I wish I was still hauling compost right about now, he thought dejectedly. You do not seem eager to partake in this competition, Wyatt, Redford said after Wyatt failed to say anything for several seconds. Shit, he thought in a panic before clearing his throat. I am merely surprised by the honor of letting me compete, Commander. My skills shall be lackluster in comparison, but I hope they will be enough to please you. As long as you perform exemplary, I shall not find you wanting, Wyatt, Redford replied. His eyes flickered for a moment, and then the AI's voice filled the room. Pilots, the competition shall begin in a minute. Form up and enter your designated training chamber. You shall be instructed what to do inside it. All of you shall face the same 6 trials. Your results, scores, and video performance shall be streamed live to one of the monitors above you. May the best pilot win. Immediately after, people began to move around, clearing the area and taking up seats on the steps that emerged from the walls and the ground at various points in the room. Go now, Wyatt. Show me your skills. Don't hold back anything, Redford said, patted his shoulder, and then left. Wyatt followed the older man with his gaze until he was several meters away. Sighing, he straightened up and walked up to his training chamber. Lined up next to him were the other participants, most of them showing nothing but seriousness and conviction. A few were visibly as nervous as he was feeling. He waited for what felt like ages, each second stretching time much like the event horizon of a black hole would do. Then he stiffened even more when he saw 3 familiar figures enter the room. The first was Cynthia Winfield, who then stepped aside to give entry to Princess Clara and her brother, the Prince. Instantly, everyone stood up and saluted in reverence to the 2 royals. The Prince made a gesture, and everyone sat down as silence filled the room. He watched as the trio made their way to where Redford was sitting, and then sat next to him in what was a private booth. Perfect. Just what I needed. Now I'm not only going to embarrass Commander Redford, but the Prince, too. I'll be lucky if he only takes away my rank and sends me to the brig, Wyatt thought, wincing internally. Pilots, the AI said, startling him. Your chambers shall open in 3, 2, 1. Please enter, the AI ordered, and left without any other choice, Wyatt entered. As the chamber closed behind him, his eyes widened in surprise, and he was unable to keep his mouth shut at what he saw. The training chambers at the academy were little more than a VR unit, but what he was looking at was a full neural dive module. It had a pristine, white, and comfortable-looking chair, a set of wires at the top, and the usual console and equipment that a line fighter possessed. He sat on the chair and sank into it with gusto. The wires came to life and quickly latched to his head, wriggling and moving as they created a direct neural interface with his brain. He grasped the handles at the end of his armrests and fiddled with the various buttons on it, admiring the graph displays and keyboards in front of him. He grinned widely, his nervousness vanishing. This ain't the real thing, but it sure feels like it. Damn, I've missed this feeling, he muttered to himself before chuckling. So what if I'm going against experienced pilots? I'll just do my best and be done with it. Whatever happens next happens, he said, and then waited for the system to start. He didn't have to wait long, as 10 seconds later he felt his brain throb for a split second. Then everything around him went black for a moment, only to be replaced by a surprisingly realistic depiction of being in space, a debris field of sorts. The voice of an AI spoke to him as if he was in a cockpit. The first trial shall be the trial of survival. There are 3 Drazen fighters in the area hunting for survivors. Avoid them until the timer runs out. Then, in front of his display monitor, he saw a 3-minute timer appear. A second later, it began to run. Without wasting a moment to be confused or surprised by the sudden start of the ordeal, Wyatt brought his engines to full max and began to dance and wedge around the debris of gutted ships. He wasn't hugely into history, but he learned his lessons well. He knew where he was. The result of an infamous battle over 1,000 years ago called the Holtan Massacre. The Drazen Collective, a warlike species of plant-based organisms that were mostly carnivorous, attacked the Principality alongside the Arabian Commonwealth, an independent human nation not part of the Pax Humanitas. The two allies only avoided an outright invasion to prevent other, stronger human nations, such as the Imperium and the Albion Federation, from assisting the Principality. Their raids were anything but, though their refusal to enter a full-scale war was the sole reason the Principality eventually managed to force a truce with them after this particular battle. While the Principality won a Pyrrhic victory, the Drazen, ever hateful of other species and desiring to take trophies and feed for themselves, hunted down every stranded fighter, shuttle, and life pod in the system after the battle was over. And now he was tasked with surviving that outcome. Far too easy, Wyatt barked out a laugh when he saw the Drazen fighters appear at the edge of his radar and were slowly but surely closing in on him. Checking the graphs and panels quickly, he discovered that he had 2 Hawk missiles available. No flares, no mines, and his twin-linker coil guns were at 20% ammo capacity. He smirked. Alert! Alert! Enemy fighters are within firing range and are engaging. Shields at 98%, the AI warned. Excellent, Wyatt replied, and spared a moment to ponder about something. This chamber is amazing. It even simulates standard G-forces, but I'm hardly feeling anything. So that's what the Kinetor implant is for. I guess the pain was worth it in the end, he exclaims excitedly, before yanking to the side as much as the ship could handle, triggering his reverse thrusters at the same time, and finally unleashing his 2 Hawk missiles at the leader of the 3 Drazen fighters. The fighters were also burning at max speed, but they were too close to Wyatt's ship to dodge the missiles in time. The 2 missiles impacted the lead fighter, triggering an explosion that destroyed it wholesale. Wyatt didn't celebrate his kill. Instead, he immediately fell upon the second fighter, showering it with a deadly barrage of focused fire. He saw the fighter's shield glow, then pop after 2 seconds of sustained fire, only to then watch how the cockpit was turned into scrap, sending the fighter veering off to the side, lost forever as another piece of debris. The third fighter reacted accordingly, turning to fire upon Wyatt. Warning, shields at 45%, the AI warned. Wyatt ignored it and began to wedge in seemingly random directions as he dodged debris and ire from the third Drazen fighter. He didn't have the ammo left to take down the third fighter like he had done the second. But he had an even better idea. As he moved gracefully at impossible speeds, purposefully taking the most hazardous paths he could find, he noticed that the Drazen fighter, being bulkier and slightly faster than his own, wasn't able to dodge all the debris, and soon he saw its shield pop, and a wing of the fighter was nearly torn completely off in the process. That's when he turned, ignoring a collision that nearly zapped his remaining shields, and fired in an arc. Most of his shots missed, but a stream of them landed on target, crippling the ship. Then he saw with satisfaction how the ship tumbled, colliding with a large chunk of what had been a cruiser, and exploded. He looked at the remaining time and saw he still had 50 seconds to spare as the countdown had stopped. Everything around him went dark, and then the view was replaced by a new vision of space, this time around a marvelous battleship as he flew in formation with other fighters. Checking his monitors again, he saw that his weapons were fully loaded. Prepare to engage! Prepare to engage! Delta Squadron, keep formation and follow my lead. An unknown but commanding voice ordered. Instantly, Wyatt obeyed and wondered what was going to happen next. Then he saw it. A group of frigates and freighters that could only belong to the Ikanti hierarchy came into view. Unlike the Drazan, the Ikanti were an avian alien species that had once been defeated by the Principality, and then, centuries later, the Principality was humiliated by them due to sheer incompetence on the Principality's side. But he didn't recognize what was going on. The situation he was in didn't seem familiar to any battle he was aware of. So this is either a raid or a kill and destroy action, he muttered to himself, frowning. He didn't approve of such actions. That was one of the reasons he detested pirates. But raiding alien supplies or disrupting their trade lanes? Well, he also didn't like it unless they were the Drazan. He hated them with a passion and wouldn't spare a second thought if that was the case. But he knew a few Icantis, and he liked the smaller, chirpy aliens. But orders are orders in this case, he said, divorcing himself from his personal feelings as the AI chimed again. This is the second trial, the trial of obedience. Do not deviate from the orders given and fulfill them with optimal capacity. And thus, Wyatt went through the motions, no matter how much he disliked it. He fought off the Drazen fighters, said Cynthia Winfield with apparent surprise. It was most commendable, Clara added, her eyes glued to the screens as she admired one assault after the other. Indeed it was, agreed Redford, stroking his chin. Few pilots make the conscious choice to fight instead of trying to flee or hide. Fewer still pass the simulation that way. And yet, his gaze fixed itself on the timer and narrowed his eyes slightly. Lieutenant Wyatt nearly broke the record on his first try. Surely you jest, Commander Redford, Cynthia countered. Have you seen the ease of his maneuvering? Almost as soon as the simulation started, he engaged his engines, announcing his presence to the enemy. He must have practiced this or similar trials extensively before, most likely in the academy. You have yet to read my report, Redford countered while watching Wyatt obeying the orders given by the squadron leader with exemplary accuracy and without doubt. Wyatt has stated that he did not receive more than a dozen trial runs in the training chambers, and then only for the basics when he was allowed. He garnered his experience through practical means and, most likely, patrol deployments. Preposterous, Cynthia replied, her stoic facade faltering as shock crossed her features. That is remarkable, Clara exclaimed, unable to hide her excitement. It seems I was correct. I have won this bet, brother dearest, she said, turning to face her silent brother. Do not count victory just yet, Clara. 4 simulations remain. Redford, I trust you made the competition substantially difficult, yes? The prince countered, impassive. I have done my best, my liege, but already I can conclude that Wyatt Staples is a man of immense talent. Once the implants fully integrate with him and with more experience, we could very well have in our hands an ace or more than that, Redford replied. Do you think he'd be capable of command at some point? Cynthia asked, watching as the freighter exploded and the simulation ended. Above, Wyatt's score went up again, putting him among the top 5. He does not have the training, the capabilities and calling for it. Who is to tell? I shall do my best to groom him into an exceptional commander if he is to gain another rank given the chance, Redford answered, but frowned. I carefully devised the sequence of the simulations to test various aspects of a pilot's personality, drive, and obedience. Some test the pilot's ability for creative and rapid thinking. Others test patience, morality, and loyalty. So far, he has excelled in both fields. Then we must watch, Clara exclaimed, wincing when she saw a competitor's fighter get destroyed for disobeying a command for the sake of personal glory. Cynthia would have rolled her eyes at her friend's love for space engagements. But she, too, was fixated on the competition, especially on a particular pilot. Another pile of scrap, Wyatt declared with a playful, mocking laughter as he destroyed a fourth drone. After the second simulation ended, the third started. The objective was easy. Destroy the automated drones before one of them can escape and report back to the enemy of his position. Pretty standard mission were it not for the fact that there were 20 drones, and they were sophisticated enough to divide their forces into those that stood behind to fight and those that moved at max speed, escaping the battlefield. At first, he went for the escaping drones, but the moment he destroyed one, another ran away in an entirely different direction. Now he was weaving back between kinetic rounds and laser strikes that tickled his shields, but they were bug bites that would eventually deplete them and destroy them if he wasn't careful. The drones weren't as fast as his fighter and didn't have shields, but were agile and small enough to cause even the fighter's targeting systems trouble. Not to mention that they all had short-range jammers, further complicating the situation. He smirked. But drones are drones. And drones are stupid and predictable, he thought, as he spared a glance at his screen, seeing a dozen drones clumped together behind him. He had spent a minute dodging their attacks and violently shifting directions. In truth, he was herding the drones together. Computer, lock targets! Fire missiles! Release the mine! He ordered, and the AI obeyed. He felt his fighter shudder as his 4 Hawk missiles and the mine's lock disengaged. 3 seconds later, the proximity mine exploded when he pressed the manual detonator, destroying the drones pursuing him in a single explosion. Then he watched with satisfaction as one by one the 4 remaining drones were destroyed when the missiles reached them. With that, the trial of extermination ended. Everything around him darkened again, and he took the moment to calm himself, readying himself for the next trial. When the view returned, he was now staring at a heavily damaged Principality frigate, and his communicator instantly detected a rescue beacon signal. Welcome to the 4th trial. This is the trial of morality. A Principality frigate has been heavily damaged after an engagement with pirates. Render aid to them. Wyatt frowned. Computer, perform a full sweep of the vessel and the surroundings. Performing, the AI replied and remained silent for several seconds. Complete. The vessel is heavily damaged and is venting atmosphere. Engines are offline. The reactor is still active and providing life support. 177 life signals were detected on board. No other gravitic, radiation, or heat signatures have been detected within sensor range. Render aid to them, Wyatt replied, crossing his arms and thinking through his possibilities. He couldn't take anyone with him. His fighter was a one-manned vessel. At the rate the frigate was venting atmosphere, he knew he wouldn't even make it half the system away before space claimed the survivors. And there were no other ships or signatures nearby. Wait, they were attacked by pirates. Where are the pirates? Computer, full power to sensors. Search for any large stationary and moving bodies. Performing. 2 bodies detected at sensor range limit and moving away. Signatures unknown, the AI informed. So it's not an ambush. Closing his eyes, he uttered the next words quietly. Computer, target the ship's reactor and fire missiles. Cannot comply. Friendly fire is prohibited, the AI retorted. Of course, Wyatt chittered. He moved his fighter around until he got a clear shot at the ship's reactor. Without hesitation, he squeezed the trigger, sending hundreds of kinetic rounds directly at the crippled frigate. 10 seconds of sustained fire were enough to puncture the already damaged reactor, and with an explosion that briefly created a small star, it was gone. This is just a simulation, damn it, he said, and all darkened again. The scene changed again, showing a pitched battle between Drazan and Principality fleets in the distance, but close enough that he could see it on the display screens. This is the 5th trial, the trial of bravery. Your squadron has been disrupted and you're on your own. Fight on for the Principality. For the Principality, Wyatt replied, eyes narrowing before moving in to join the battle. I'm surprised he took the time to assess the situation like that. Most others just destroyed the ship without a second thought, Cynthia pointed out. It seems that I have many bloodthirsty pilots under my command, Redford commented. Given the circumstances, they shall be useful. But I concur with your assessment, Lady Cynthia. I was not expecting him to ensure that it wasn't a trap. I must confess, I thought he would try to save anyone at all. A sad reality we must face in times of peril. Not everyone can be saved. Sometimes taking the humane option is all the aid anyone can expect to receive. And deliver, the prince said, nodding once in approval. That being said, his skill in combat against those drones was exceptional. Even veterans have difficulty clearing that simulation successfully. Clara didn't say anything as she was too fixated on the ongoing battles across the screens. They all started roughly at the same time, though Wyatt maintained a 10-second advantage over the rest, thanks to his quick victory in the first simulation. But his advantage dwindled as he took a more cautious, measured approach with the following ones. Out of the 20 participants, 5 had already been destroyed after 2 minutes of feverish battle. They performed well as they were veterans and great pilots, but that just wasn't enough to grant them victory. Another participant fell seconds later, followed by another, and yet one more in quick succession. Only when only 3 remained did she feel a hand touch her shoulder. She didn't bother to look at Cynthia as she pulled her back. Who cared about being unsightly when she was seeing something that she loved? She couldn't be a pilot thanks to her status, but she had always loved watching fighter squadrons fly through space and the atmosphere. She had a huge collection of recordings depicting dogfights, and she never missed any of the racing and fighting tournaments. Her love for it was open and on full display, and as she watched Wyatt and the 2 remaining participants do their best in their simulations, she couldn't help but smile when the scripted destruction of the Drazen flagship signaled the end of the simulation. She relaxed in her seat, sighing contently as she watched Wyatt's name go from 4th place to 3rd. Commander Redford, why is Wyatt in 3rd place? His performance so far, in my not insignificant opinion, has been most excellent and above the rest of the participants. He should be at the lead. Clara, Cynthia sighed. Your Majesty, Wyatt is a commoner, Redford answered, saying nothing more. Dejected, the princess frowned slightly. Yes, of course. How forgetful of me. I was so enthralled by the performance that Redford, no, no. Whatever she was going to say died in her throat when she noticed that every screen was black and all at once came to life to show the same scenario. You didn't, Redford. The prince gave out a dignified chuckle. Clara, calm yourself. It wouldn't be a competition without a true test now, would it? Through her time of service and more years being Clara's closest friend, Cynthia came to know several things about her friend's tastes, hobbies, duties, and more. While she didn't share the burning love Clara had for fighter races, shows, tournaments, and dogfights, she knew enough to recognize the 6th and final simulation Redford had prepared for the 20 pilots. ZTK 990, one of the unwinnable scenarios, she muttered. Redford nodded, his face stoic and serious. Better known as honor in death. This is the 6th and final trial, the trial of glory. Die with honor, the AI said. For his part, Wyatt couldn't believe what he was seeing. It was a lone Principality cruiser. There were no stations, no asteroids, no planets, moons, or anything else he could use as cover. Just pure, open, cold space between the cruiser and his lone fighter. Die with honor, he muttered. Then he gritted his teeth. Die with honor, he shouted, hitting his armrests at the same time. A cruiser set against a single fighter? How am I to die with honor? Honor, honor, it says. What the fuck is even honor worth if I'm dead? He spat angrily. Die with honor. What a joke. Only a petulant blue blood could come up with something so stupid. Die with honor, my ass. If I have to die, then I'll welcome it. But not like this. Not when I can still do something. Die with honor? Screw that, he chanted, his veins pumping hot iron instead of blood at that precise moment. Then he analyzed his situation. My missiles won't do anything to the cruiser. At best, the mine could weaken its shields first somewhat. My guns are useless. My only advantage is my size and speed, but that cruiser has enough missiles to swarm me. If I get too close, then the PD turrets will shred me to pieces. What can I even do? As he pondered his situation, he noticed that the cruiser wasn't doing anything. It was waiting for him to make the first move. An eternity passed, or maybe it was just a minute, perhaps more, perhaps less. Time lost meaning as Wyatt tried to come up with any solution whatsoever. Eventually, he smirked. Die with honor? I'd rather live in shame, he said, and his fighter began to move. There goes another one, Cynthia exclaimed, as the 15th participant's ship exploded. At least this one opened communications first. 9 surrendered their ship and were destroyed for cowardice. 3 more tried to negotiate and were destroyed for insubordination. 2 attempted to fight back and were destroyed for treason, Redford listed. Make that 10 surrender attempts now, he said as the 16th ship exploded. Clara said nothing as she stared at the screens, and the large, bold word now appearing on 16 of them. Defeat. She knew this scenario well, but how to beat it was a closely guarded secret that, even for her, took several bribes and favors to get the answer to that puzzling simulation. In short, you had to commit suicide, but not just any sort of suicide. To pass, you had to contact the cruiser and proclaim your loyalty toward the principality, and more pointedly, to the noble houses that ruled it. You then had to admit to the crimes you were accused of, and then, only after being judged worthy enough to do so, you were permitted to die with honor. You were allowed to commit suicide via self-destruction or by spacing yourself. Supposedly, only those truly honorable and loyal to the principality could figure out what needed to be done. It was as unfair and one-sided as it could get. Another fighter exploded, choosing correctly to commit suicide, but without the proper steps first. Thus, another defeat was in full display. The rest of the watchers were murmuring amongst each other, doing their best to not disturb royalty, and, more so, the prince himself. But she could make out faint bets being claimed, jests, and other unsavory comments here and there. When the 18th ship exploded and was shortly followed by the 19th, her sole focus remained on Wyatt's screen. He had not moved in over 3 minutes now, she noticed. What is he waiting for? Cynthia questioned. Surely even he must realize there is no winning this. No matter how talented of a pilot he is, victory is impossible in those circumstances. Redford was about to comment something when all of a sudden Wyatt's ship surged forth, quickly reaching maximum speed. What is he doing? He asked, astonished. Something unorthodox, I presume, the prince said, lips curling into a barely perceptible smirk. Clara watched intently as Wyatt's fighter launched all 4 Hawk missiles, but they didn't surge forth right away. Instead, they formed up below his fighter only for the mine to be released along with its clamp. The magnetic clamp latched itself to one of the missiles, and then they ventured forth quickly. The cruiser then launched its counter-assault in the form of a dozen missiles and a series of kinetic projectiles. Its 2 railguns were just warming up and wouldn't be able to intercept the fighter for a few seconds yet. The fighter weaved and moved gracefully yet violently to avoid the incoming fire, deploying all of its flares to further confuse the cruiser's targeting system. Then, the fighter activated its emergency afterburner and suddenly tripled in speed. Is he insane? Redford declared, not believing what he was seeing. In truth, no one watching could believe what they were seeing. The fighter was now going too fast, and thanks to the scrambled and confused targeting system of the cruiser, it failed to take it down as it left a plume of white-hot light behind it. Seconds seemed to stretch for hours until the small fighter, traveling at impossible speeds, enough to liquefy the bones of its pilot, slammed against the shields of the cruiser with the strength equivalent of a nuclear warhead. It was more than enough to knock the shields down, but caused no more than a few cosmetic scratches on the outer hull. Wyatt's suicidal ditch effort had, it seemed, failed. That is, of course, until the missiles arrived 5 seconds after the initial impact. The cruiser and everyone watching had been so focused on the insanity of the fighter ramming attempt that they had completely ignored the missiles. Even the cruiser's missiles had flown into dark space, their original objective lost. The missiles impacted at the same time in the exact spot the fighter had been aiming for, the bridge deck. Alone, the missiles wouldn't have caused enough damage to do more than serious exterior damage. But the mine was another monster altogether. The mine exploded along with the missiles, and their combined explosive force was more than enough to destroy the entire bridge deck, crippling the ship at least for some time, and forcing it to either retreat to safety from the auxiliary command consoles or wait to be rescued. As if that wasn't enough, the display shifted quickly away from the cruiser and focused on a small, oval-shaped cockpit that had been ejected from the fighter at some point during the encounter. Most likely when the flares were deployed and the rest had been programmed automatically. Then the screen went black and a new word appeared on it, something that caused everyone, even the prince himself, to stand up in shock. Victory! Clara couldn't hide her wide, pearly white smile. That was the best performance I've ever seen, she thought gleefully. When Wyatt's chamber opened, he was instantly greeted by flabbergasted Redford. Commander? How? He asked without thinking. How did that you even thought of doing something like that? And the program? Counted that as a victory? How? His voice was calm and collected, but it couldn't hide just how amazed he was. I must admit, Lieutenant Wyatt Staples, that I'm most impressed too. Never have I seen such a creative take on that particular scenario, the prince said, approaching regally. Tell us, what drove you to reach such a conclusion? Yeah, I'm not about to tell him that I pretty much thought the goal was stupid now, am I? Wyatt cleared his throat. The goal was to die with honor, so I thought, what if there's another way? He paused as he saw Cynthia and Clara approach, and behind them several spectators also got closer, but keeping a respectful distance from the royals to avoid crowding them. And well, that happened, my liege. But how? A single fighter crippling a cruiser, that is beyond ridiculous, Cynthia exclaimed. What the hell is going on? They're acting as if I did something extraordinary. Ugh, I'm probably going to get court-martialed for not following that asinine objective. Seriously, die with honor? Who came up with that absurdity? Wyatt raised both hands in defense. I'm not sure that can work in an actual fight. It was just a simulation, after all. I knew I lacked the fighter power to do anything significant. But then I realized that while I didn't have the power, I had the mass. So I used it to let my guns be effective. And I doubt I'd survive on an ejected cockpit for long, but it doubles as a lifeboat in an emergency. He then saluted and turned to Redford. Commander, I hope that my abilities were suitable enough to be of your approval. Suitable enough? Redford shook his head. Wyatt, look up behind you. Wyatt blinked twice, turned, and stared up to see his display screen showing the word victory. Then after a second or two, every screen displayed the score and the rank of the competitors. He saw his name sitting at the top. First place, Lieutenant Wyatt Staples. Final score, 95,690 points. Huh, 50,000 points more than the second place, Wyatt thought. Then he fainted. Chapter 7. The question we all should be asking is why the ZTK-990 simulation counted Lieutenant Wyatt Staples' actions as a victory. Does anyone at all have an inkling that that was even an option? Commander Lukacs Ishtal asked, but found no answer as he eyed his fellow commanders. Sitting around a table, the 8 available commanders remained silent while the video recording of Wyatt's performance replayed on their monitor displays for the 8th time. Juliana Winfield smirked when the impossible message of victory appeared on her screen and relaxed on her side the rest of the commanders present. To her left and going in a clockwise pattern was Redford Kalen, a good friend and her mentor. He was silent, but she knew he was beyond perplexed. Then came the hoity-toity and smug red-haired William Hempstroke. His expression was for once unreadable, and it caused her no small amount of amusement. Then came the robust, strong, black-haired Hannah Talaro. Lukacs Ishtal was next, while the remaining 3 commanders, the old, seasoned, and insufferable George Lintar, the brown-haired and scarred Frederick Anderson, and the stick-up-her-ass, bald Vivian Terabas. That should be flagged as treason, George Lintar said, frowning. For a commoner pilot to even think of attacking his superiors? How do we know he won't betray us at some point for convenience? And yet, the simulation counted it as a victory, Juliana replied. We all know the unwinnable scenarios, no matter the branch of the military, are a large mystery even to us. We should be praising Wyatt Staples for his outside-the-box thinking. I am aware that that's the reason you managed to escape the Black Ship's assault in the first place, Redford. Indeed it is, Redford replied, impassive and stoic. He tossed a compost container at the ship as a mine of sorts, a trash container turned into ordnance. Never would have believed it before that day. I'm certain that the ship's crew was as baffled as I was when I first heard of what he did. But to achieve this, I am confused. It took me over 50 attempts to figure out how to beat that simulation when I was just a lieutenant commander. We all know that the K990 simulations and how to beat them are a closely guarded secret and that we cannot share how to obtain victory. Many have more than one possible solution. And yet, Vivian Taravis hummed deeply, frowning, arms crossed. Who would have thought that ZTK 990 would have another way to be solved? And many have seen it. Keeping it a secret will be difficult. Knowing Princess Clara, she'll try to not only keep a recording of it for herself, something I'm certain she's already acquired, but spread it at some point or another. The prince himself will have to talk to her, Juliana replied, and all commanders agreed with a nod or a soft grumble. Speaking of that, Redford, how are the other pilots taking it? Hannah Talaro asked as she turned her attention to Redford. It is a mixed response. In these past 2 days, Wyatt has received as much admiration as scorn, Redford replied. Frederick rolled his eyes. Let me guess. The nobles scorn him while his fellow commoner rabble praises his deeds. Are they seeing him as a figure to emulate? Like I said, it is a mixed response, Redford replied once more. Sensing that his fellow commanders wouldn't drop the subject unless he fessed up, he sighed. Both sides scorn him and praise him for different reasons. Some commoners outright detest him. Apparently, they believe he is lording himself over them due to His Majesty's direct praise and acknowledgement in the form of his new rank. The nobles that wish to bring ridicule on him are those he directly defeated in the tournament, except for one, and those that see him as an upstart. In both groups, however, are those who judge him for his ability and show limited support. And Wyatt Staples himself? How is he behaving after his victory? Lukacs asked, curiously. Redford smirked. After he fainted, he was brought to medical and woke up an hour later. At first, he believed it was all a dream, but when he saw his score and the recording, he went silent. The impression of actually winning overpowered him. He is not a man used to being praised, nor do I believe he thinks too highly of himself. He is humble, yet he knows he's an outstanding pilot. Do you think he could become an ace? William asked, intrigued. After his display in the simulations, I do not know. Redford leaned forth. His attitude is paradoxical to me. He is eager and confident enough to enter combat, yet seeks no personal glory. He is more than capable of following protocol, order, and maneuvers, yet he is ingenious, inventive, and thinks outside the box. He is a loyal pilot and soldier, yet will do anything in his hands to win and survive. Truth be told, I think we may have the makings of a new lone wolf within our ranks. You must surely be joking, Redford, George proclaimed, while William and Frederick nodded in agreement. A commoner cannot be a lone wolf. He lacks the training and the connections necessary to be one. Commoners serve, and nobles lead. That has always been the fundamental cornerstone of the principality. And yet, there have been exceptional commoners who have risen to a noble status, minor or grand, inconsequential or impactful. It has happened, Vivian replied, eyes wandering to Redford. House Kalen is one such an example, and no one doubts it's more than 1,000 years of noble bloodline, correct? True, but the sheer thought that a garbage hauler and a lowly pilot could achieve such a status. Preposterous, George countered. I won't object to the decision of the prince, but Wyatt Staples is a wild card that we know little about. Until we know where his loyalty lies, we should take measures to ensure he won't outshine those of purer blood again, or remove him if he becomes a threat. I agree, but only after a thorough investigation, we will decide what we shall do, Juliana remarked. Redford, I trust that you, as commander of the fighter division, will know how to best use Wyatt's abilities? I do, and it is another point of difficulty for me. He doesn't have any sort of training in commanding roles at all. He can lead a squadron of fighters easily, but anything beyond that is out of his current capabilities. I'm certain he will learn. The fourth simulation proved he can make measured, level-headed decisions. Losing a pilot with his innate talent would be wasteful. Crossing his arms, he leaned back. As to ZTK 990's dilemma, I believe I have a theory. Wyatt's actions, I insist, should be flagged for potential treason at the very least. There was no honor in his actions, George began, but was cut off by Vivian. And yet, he uncovered a second path to victory none of us knew about. Even the prince was surprised. What is your theory, Redford? She asked, glaring at the oldest commander in the room. Each unwinnable scenario has a nickname. For example, GVK 990 is known as Beyond Fury. BPK 990 is the infamous Murder House. And ZTK 990 is Honor in Death. Think about that nickname, Honor in Death. What does honor imply? Is it even the point of the simulation? The only command given is to die with honor, but how to achieve it? A mere suicide doesn't cut it. Fighting back is pointless, or so we thought, and proving your loyalty beyond doubt was the only viable solution. You're dancing around the subject, Redford. What is it that you're trying to say? Lukacs asked impatiently. Juliana processed what her old mentor had said, and as she stared at the still screen, a realization dawned on her. Well, I'll be. That was an option all along. All eyes turned to her, Redford's dull gray irises beaming with pride. The objective is to die with honor, right? You can either accept your death and be granted that honor, or fight against overwhelming odds and still win somehow, keeping your honor intact. If that were to happen in real life, Wyatt would die in his ejected cockpit in a few hours, but he'd die on his terms, with a smile on his face, knowing he stuck it up fate's ass. Barbaric, Frederick muttered with disgust. This is precisely why I rolled out of the Navy. Uncultured brutes such as Wyatt are such a detriment, a blemish that shouldn't be allowed to pollute the honorable ranks of the military in any way. The Army knows about true diligence and honor. Juliana wanted to roll her eyes at Frederick's response. Being the highest-ranked noble in the room, his entitlement was more than palpable. Suddenly, they all received the same message directly into their brains. Arrival at Gintrack successful. All personnel, report to your stations. It seems our reunion will have to be concluded earlier than expected, Redford said as all 8 commanders stood up at the same time. Juliana, a word if you will? Juliana gave her mentor a curt nod and waited until the rest left the room. Once their privacy was ensured, she asked with a raised eyebrow, "What is it, Redford?" "I've received reports that state Cynthia has been training with Wyatt. Have you authorized this?" he asked gently. Juliana was momentarily stunned, then chuckled full of mirth. "No, I didn't. I'm sure Clara has something to do with it. What sort of training is my sister giving your new star pilot, Redford?" "Hand-to-hand combat, marksman practice, and endurance training so he can get used to the Kinetor implant." He paused, frowning. "What they did to him is unacceptable. I must thank Cynthia for filing a complaint herself." Juliana nodded. "And you took a gamble by vouching for him to get those implants, Redford. It seems it paid off." Another chuckle escaped her lips. "How is my sister treating the budding lieutenant? Don't tell me he is also a prodigy in those fields?" Redford laughed. "If defeat is a learning experience, then Wyatt has been receiving an intense data stream upload these past 2 days. Cynthia shows him no mercy." Juliana smirked widely. "As it should be." "Again?" Cynthia ordered as she stood over the panting man that was Wyatt Staples. Give me a moment, please," Wyatt begged, and was not ashamed to do so. His lungs burned, his muscles were sore, and he was sure he'd sprained muscles he didn't know he had before. 2 days. 2 days of this torture. Training. This isn't training. This is agony, Wyatt thought as his chest heaved with exertion. After his surprising victory and everything that brought with it, he found himself being metaphorically dragged by the blue-haired woman to the gym area. There, she proceeded to teach him several warm-up routines that he found satisfying despite not focusing on his physical training all that much. Then, the terror began. She was a predatory bird watching him obey her commands. Push-ups, sit-ups, weightlifting, treadmill running, focused breathing, and more, just to test his endurance. It was the amount and the speed at which she wanted her orders fulfilled that were a torment to me. Worst of all, every mistake was met by a thwack of her rod that hurt like hell, but left no bruises behind. After the endurance training, she wanted to test his hand-to-hand skills, of which he had none. He was never good at fighting with his fists. Martial arts were puzzling at best, and anything more elaborate than throwing a punch, kicking something, or headbutting was beyond his capabilities. As a result, Cynthia handed him his ass every time. Their first duel ended before he knew what had happened. It wasn't particularly fair either, as she never took off her armor, and he was forced to do everything in training shorts, a tank top, and sports shoes. My only saving grace is my skill with the rifle, he thought as he struggled to stand up, knowing he'd be back down before long. He wasn't a particularly good shot, but he wasn't terrible either. He was no marksman or sniper, but he knew how to shoot a gun. Shaking his head, he stood up to shaky feet. He then brought his arms up, his hands curled into fists, taking a defensive stance. Cynthia sighed. Your posture is horrible. Part your feet more, lower your back, and take a firmer stance. Did you learn nothing about combat in the academy? Obeying her commands as best he could, he replied, I was never fond of using my fists to fight. Using something like a plasma cutter, a sword, axe, or any sort of melee weapon only endangers me and those around me. I can still throw grenades and use firearms, as you've seen, Cynthia, he replied. Why does this matter anyway? What if you're challenged to a duel, Wyatt, or you don't have a gun in the middle of a fight? You may be a fighter pilot first and foremost, but you are still a pilot, and you may be required to fly other vessels. You need to be prepared, she said, relaxing her posture. And so far, I'm not impressed. Now come at me. Challenge to a duel? Why would I ever accept that? I'm not a noble, and even if I was, I would never accept a duel. I'd just shoot the guy and be done with it. And if I don't have a gun, I'll run away or hide, he thought tiredly. He was grateful to Cynthia for teaching him how to endure the pain and discomfort the implants put him through. More than that, she was a noble that he could respect. But she was still a noble, and, like a noble, honor, pride, and ego were great concerns to her. With a deep breath and a slow exhale, he lunged forth, throwing a punch at her face that she easily dodged. Moving quickly, he stepped to the side and delivered a second punch to the side. He'd been beaten over 100 times in 2 days, and he'd learned some of her moves. Not that it did any good, and she simply blocked his fist, grabbed his wrist, and the next second he was on the air before hitting the mat with his back again. Gah! He cried out and gasped for air. You lasted half a second longer this time, Wyatt. Get up! Again! Cynthia commanded. Wyatt wasn't sure if she praised him or insulted him, but that didn't matter. He stood up, ready to kiss the floor again. Suddenly, all activity in the room ceased, and the two of them froze as they received a message through the ship's AI. Enemy ships detected. All personnel report to battle stations. This is not a simulacrum. All personnel report to battle stations. Then, before he could do anything about it, Wyatt got a second message coming from Redford. Lieutenant Wyatt, report to the launch bay immediately. Gear up and be ready for deployment. Nothing else followed. Wyatt and Cynthia exchanged a look and nodded. They ran in different directions to fulfill their duties. Chapter 8. The prince stared at the tactical display as the fleet moved in unison in a direction that best eluded the 12 opposing ships, trying to remain as far away from their weapons' effective range as possible. While they had the numerical and strength advantage, he wasn't willing to take his chances so brazenly. The Principality's usual tactic to engage head-on when possessing an overwhelming advantage had gained it many victories and dozens of humiliating defeats in its history. The information the ship I sent as a scout and what Lieutenant Wyatt told us about Gintrax correlates. Except for this ship, he said, pointing at the largest dot in the map. A battlecruiser. Princess Clara stood next to her brother while Cynthia silently watched over her from a few feet behind her. The princess narrowed her eyes and turned to her brother. They knew we were coming this way? There were no intercepted transmissions originating from Faldo, so they were not warned of our coming. That battlecruiser must have been dispatched here just in case we took this route. The other ships are corvettes and a few gunships, outdated and in dire need of being refitted. Wyatt's information was correct, the prince said, eyes narrowing. They must know they can't win, and yet they are shadowing our movements, Clara pointed out. Are there any other vessels in the system? Dozens upon dozens. All of them are civilian grade. Freighters, haulers, shuttles, and defense gunships, the prince answered. pointing with a finger at the map and the several dozen dots moving to a large station partially masked by a moon. That must be Woodshaft. My liege, Cynthia spoke up. Should we conscript the civilian ships for this fight? The prince shook his head gently. I will not allow this conflict to evolve into a civil war, Cynthia. The fact that the enemy fleet has not issued demands or orders to the civilian ships means they are following similar protocols. He clenched his fists bitterly. Duke Draymore wishes to eliminate or capture me as swiftly as possible to end this succession dispute in his favor. Wise of him. I still don't understand why our uncle is doing this. He never showed any real interest in the throne, nor was he outspoken against our father, his brother. What changed? What of our cousins? Have they sided with our uncle? Or do they see his coup for the madness it is? She closed her eyes for a moment, then snapped them back open with determination. I don't want to harm Gabriel or Veronica, brother. Neither do I, Clara. But for whatever reason, our uncle has come to this move. We can't allow him to succeed. He has committed treason. 2 years, Clara. He had been preparing for 2 years, possibly much longer than that, and we never suspected a thing until discrepancies in his financial and material reports were uncovered. He is a traitor, Clara, and like a traitor, he shall be severely punished alongside his conspirators. What about Duchess Emerald of Trinar and Duke Ionati of Vault? Clara asked, hopeful. You rarely keep me updated with the ongoing political turmoil, brother dearest. The information we receive is scattered and fragmented. The whole principality is in chaos and disruptions are commonplace. Almost the entire principality is now aware of the coup attempt. Duke Draymore has lost the element of surprise and will be forced to act more directly. However, I can at least confirm that House Ionati and House Emerald have declared neutrality in this conflict. I expected this from Uncle Oscar, but Aunt Sylvia, I was sure she would side with us. There is turmoil, intrigue, and deals that I am blind to. Our father held many secrets, and he shared precious few with me. As I stand now, I can't do anything. It is frustrating. We shall stand victorious, brother dearest. Uncle Cornelius will be defeated and we'll get our answers, Clara reassured her brother, the prince, before silence fell between them for several long, cold moments. Only the idle noises of the bridge crew members working at their stations echoed in the room, all orders and reports passing through the ship's network. She could access it, but there was nothing she could do to contribute. She had no military training, her strategic and tactical skills were lackluster, and her abilities in diplomacy were useless, as long as the enemy fleet refused to open any communications with them. I've given orders to deploy fighter squadrons. We shall deal with the battlecruiser while the fighters hunt down their ships to cripple them rather than destroy them, if at all possible, the prince suddenly announced. Admiral Damien, I leave my fleet under your command. Understood, my liege. May I ask, do you wish that vessel captured, crippled, or destroyed? The older man asked with respect. Has the vessel been identified yet? The prince asked in turn. Not yet, my liege. Signatures indicate that it is part of the Third Fleet, but nothing else is. Please ignore my previous statement, my prince. I have just received confirmation that the battlecruiser in question is the rightful path of House Caiston. It is most certainly commanded by a main bloodline of the Caiston family, perhaps by Andrew Caiston, the heir of the house. In that case, cripple the vessel and then order a boarding assault, the prince commanded. If we capture the heir of House Caiston, we may learn some of their secrets. It shall be done, your majesty, the admiral replied, before focusing his full attention on the coming battle. On the tactical display, Clara and Cynthia watched as 24 tiny orbs formed around their fleet, each one representing a squadron of fighters. Like raindrops, they spread in several directions, all heading to the same objective. All they could do now was wait and see the battle play out. How I've missed this feeling. The training chambers are good, but nothing beats flying an actual ship. And I'm flying a line Raptor fighter. Wham and Weskull won't believe it when I tell them. His cheery mood dropped as the faces of his brothers flashed before his eyes. That is, if I ever see them again. When was the last time I spoke to them? To Mom and Dad? Hell, when was the last time I sent them a message or got one in return? 2, 3 years? I wonder how they're doing. He pondered for a few moments, then shook his head violently. No, don't think about them. They're safe and they're just middle-class commoners in an almost worthless dirtball. Focus on the now, Wyatt. he said to himself to rein in his wary thoughts and focus once more on the objective. It's not just your life on the line now, Wyatt. You're now responsible for 4 more, he muttered, regaining his composure and watching the display monitor with 4 names on it following a coded tagline. The first was Epsilon 2, another Raptor fighter piloted by one Ensign Gregor Undaj. Epsilon 3 followed, piloted by Warrant Officer Leopold Dakar. Epsilon 4 was next, piloted by Sub-Lieutenant Abacus Reed. The 4th life under his charge was Epsilon 5, piloted by Ensign Noltar Olkara. Meanwhile, he was Epsilon 1, the leader of Epsilon Squadron. Commander Redford had thrust him into that position without much fanfare or warning, but for once he had some experience in that regard. Wyatt relaxed on his seat and rolled his shoulders, feeling the dampening suit that further allowed him to withstand high G-forces and movements that would render an inexperienced person unconscious. Or worse, within moments. It was tight but not distracting or obtrusive at all, but that was not the reason he rolled his shoulders. The reason was that he was no longer sore nor tired after enduring Cynthia's torture session barely an hour earlier. A chuckle escaped his throat. The Dulaxis implant works marvels. No wonder the richest nobles back in the academy always looked so damn crisp and full of energy all the time, he muttered to himself before checking his tactical display. He and his 3 partner squadrons were still far away from their objective, a rundown corvette on the outer shell of the enemy formation. He could already see the few fighters the beast of a battlecruiser had at its disposal deploying, but were not moving to intercept any fighter squadrons so far. They would wait within the protective umbrella of the ship's PD cannons and turrets before engaging the stragglers. Simple, but effective. He frowned at the display, seeing the fleets slowly moving and the Prince's fleet peel a few ships, mainly frigates, 2 destroyers, and a light cruiser to start harassing the battlecruiser. Why are they even fighting? Are they just delaying us, or do they have suicidal orders? What's their game? His thoughts were interrupted when his radio chimed in. Epsilon, Nu, and Omicron squadrons, this is Delta 1. Squadron leaders, report in. Epsilon 1 reporting, he replied almost instantly, hearing the other 2 reply shortly after one another. This is Nu 1 reporting. Omicron 1 here. Systems nominal. We have our orders. Cripple our objective and move in to assist where needed after that. This will be a cakewalk. Fly with honor and fight for the Prince and the Principality. Try not to get shot down, Delta 1 said. For the Principality, Wyatt replied enthusiastically, feeling his blood pumping as the prospect of battle grew closer. In truth, he was afraid. Everything had shifted around his life so abruptly. Redford Kalen was the first noble that had ever given him the least modicum of respect. But not only that, he treated him fairly. Cynthia was in that same category, and he was sure that her training sessions, which would continue for as long as events permitted, were a result of his victory in the competition. Then there were the Prince himself and his younger sister, Princess Clara Astor, who treated him like a person, not a mere commoner. Maybe that was their way of showing gratitude, but he didn't ponder it. It had been just a little over a standard week since that eventful cross of fate that turned his world upside down. There's no excuse for failure, he said to himself, muttering one of the military tenets he learned by heart. Computer, time before we enter the Corvette's PD range? 41 seconds and counting, the AI replied. Wyatt hummed deeply, thinking about which approach would be the most effective. He wasn't worried about the main weapons of the Corvette. The spinal-mounted railgun, heavy laser turrets, and the plasma cannons were meant to fight and destroy all sorts of enemies. Except for fighters, be they piloted or drones. Fighters lacked true firepower to stand alone against anything bigger than a poorly armored and armed freighter. The armor plating was there mainly to hold the ship itself together and protect from micro-impacts. The shields were enough to withstand a few shots, but were, as an instructor once put it, paper thin. And the weapons, while effective, couldn't do much damage on their own except for the tactical mine. But for each downside, there was an advantage too. The size of a fighter made it next to impossible for any ship bigger than another fighter or a bomber to target it with anything besides missiles and PD weapons. Then there was the speed and maneuverability it possessed, making missiles almost equally useless since a fighter could outrun them, destroy them, or avoid their detonation with ease. It took a particularly green pilot or a heavily damaged fighter to get taken down that way. Finally, stealth. As long as the fighter killed its engine, radars would not detect it. Only scanners would be able to pick up the metal alloys and electrical components that made up the vessel. And that was the beauty of a fighter in Wyatt's humble opinion. Alone, they represented no real danger, but in vast numbers, they were deadly to anything but the most heavily armored and shielded vessels. This meant that in the Principality, being the backwater that it was, precious few ships could stand up against a swarm of fighter squadrons, or so many believed. He was of a different take regarding the effectiveness of a single fighter. While he agreed that swarm tactics reigned supreme and were deadly, there was nothing more devastating than a single fighter or single squadron of them. Making use of their advantages to the fullest of their potential could and had spelled the doom of heavyweight ships and stations in the past. Many fighters were a problem. A few or just one would be overlooked or ignored, and that was a deadly line of thought to have. 10 seconds for contact, the AI spoke. This is Epsilon 1. Engage standard formation. Lock your targets on the PD turrets, Wyatt ordered as he did the same. Locked. Acknowledged. Locked. Ready to fire. His squadron reported immediately. The second they crossed the effective range of the Corvette's PD range, it began to spew fire in all directions. But 8 PD turrets were scant protection against 20 Raptor fighters. Volley! He ordered, and saw with satisfaction how his display was illuminated by 2 Hawk missiles being fired from each member of his squadron, joining the 30 other missiles of their fellow squadrons. The PD turrets changed targets, and counter missiles were launched from their tubes in an effort to destroy the incoming barrage. Out of the 40 missiles fired, 17 were destroyed either by counter detonations or successful hits from the turrets, but 13 hit their marks. Just like that, their shield flickered. 8 effective PD turrets became 5. Their antenna was destroyed, and 2 small gaping holes were left on the hull of the Corvette. Measuring 800 meters long, 200 in width, and 150 in height, the ugly box-like ship refused to give up. 2 fighters fell out of formation and were struck down by their turrets. Another was caught by a missile and was turned into slag. A fair trade-off by all measures so far. Epsilon Squadron, cripple their engines while Delta Squadron does its work, Wyatt ordered, moving with his wing behind the Corvette. From his monitor, and thanks to the external cameras, the several hundred-kilometer distance between them and the ship was all but inconsequential as they quickly moved into effective range of their coil guns. Another 3 PD turrets were destroyed by New Squadron, followed shortly by the last 2, and the collapse of the ship's shields by Omicron Squadron. Virtually defenseless now, Wyatt and his squadron pounced at the turrets until they were less than 2 kilometers away from the Corvette. There was no need to get any closer, as they could just pepper the engines at a safe distance. So close that if he had a window, he would be able to see the ship with his naked eye. Maintain distance and focus fire on their engines. Cripple it, he commanded, and squeezed the trigger. The rattling of the coil guns made his fighter vibrate, and he watched with satisfaction how a deluge of white-hot pieces of accelerated metal slammed against the side of the Corvette's engines, slowly chipping at it and ensuring an eventual tearing effect. Alert! Epsilon 4 is moving out of formation, the AI warned. Wyatt watched his tactical display and saw that indeed Epsilon 4 was moving in closer to the Corvette. Epsilon 4, return to formation immediately. What do you think you're doing? I can't stand it anymore. Taking orders from you is humiliating. Why would Commander Redford put you in charge of the squadron? I won't let a filthy commoner take the glory for this victory, Abacus Reed replied. Wyatt gritted his teeth. Return to formation, Epsilon 4. That's a direct order. Epsilon 4, Abacus Reed, return to formation immediately. Epsilon 4 has deactivated his transmitter, the AI informed him. What is that stupid idiot thinking? Take all the glory? What glory? Commander Redford is the one who will be taking any credit whatsoever from this. I'm hardly calling the shots here. Arrogant, lousy, stupid piece of... Wyatt's train of thought was cut short when he saw what was Abacus's plan to take all the glory for himself. Idiot! He shouted in rage and disbelief. All fighters, retreat! Clear off! Now! He shouted in a desperate attempt to prevent any major losses. Luckily for him, almost every other fighter listened and quickly turned away at max speed. 3 seconds later, the explosion happened. Abacus Reed, in all his wisdom, had decided to take out the ship's engines in a single strike by using his tactical mind. The moment Wyatt saw that his mind was activated, he knew what was going to happen. The funny thing about the tactical mines was that they were pretty resistant to heat to prevent any accidental triggers, enough to withstand the heat emanated from the fighter's engines or the thrusters of missiles. They were nasty and effective pieces of work and packed quite a punch after they were armed. So what happened when a mine was armed and thrown at a ship's active, roaring, hot plume-spewing engines from less than 500 meters away? Fireworks. A huge explosion blinded the external cameras for a few seconds, but when it was over, the Corvette's engines were offline because half of them were missing. Alongside it, the signal from Epsilon 4 went red and silent. Two unfortunate fighters from New Squadron were also caught in the blast, unable to veer off in time despite his warning. Insufferable, glory-seeking, self-righteous blue bloods, Wyatt half screamed in pure anger, unable to vent his fury any other way. Taking a moment to assess the situation, he managed to suppress his fury in order to fulfill his role as squadron leader. Epsilon Squadron, damage report, he ordered, opening the channel. Epsilon 5 reporting. No damage sustained, Lieutenant, came the shaky response from Noltar Olkara. Epsilon 2 reporting. My computer indicates that my engines suffered minor damage due to shrapnel and will only operate at 80% efficiency, Gregor Undaj reported. Epsilon 3 reporting. Systems ready and undamaged, Lieutenant, Leopold Dakar said, unable to hide the tremor in his voice. Wyatt sighed. Understood. Epsilon 2, return to base. You're still able to fight, but I won't risk any unforeseen malfunctions on your vessel. Understood, Lieutenant. Disengaging, Gregor Undaj said, and soon Wyatt saw on his display that his fighter was peeling off and heading back to the Exalted Virtue, the Prince's cruiser and flagship of their fleet. This is Delta 1. Hairwire Mines detonation in 3, 2, 1. Wyatt heard him count, and a static haze washed over the cameras for a moment. The Corvette was dead in space, and the Haywire mines ensured that they wouldn't be able to overload their reactor in an attempt to avoid boarding and capture. The objective has been successfully crippled. Head to the following coordinates. Understood. Epsilon Squadron shall move as... Wyatt was cut off when the sudden chime and alarm of missiles locking onto his ship rang inside his cockpit. Evasive maneuvers, he ordered before moving to do precisely that himself. Computer, who launched those missiles? Unknown point of origin, the AI replied. A sudden tremor of dread filled his heart, and he snapped a growl. Computer, calculate the vector trails of the missiles and draw approximate points of origin, he ordered as he weaved and turned, outrunning the two missiles chasing him. Thanks to his tactical display, he noticed that every fighter in his squadron and the other three had also been targeted and were doing their best to avoid the missiles. They moved and danced to an unheard tune, and one by one, the missiles were destroyed. A volley of shots rained past his fighter's side, and the two missiles were safely destroyed. Looking at his screen, he saw that Epsilon 5 had shot the missiles down. Thank you, Epsilon 5. I owe you one. No need, Lieutenant. Happy to help. Where did those missiles come from? Noltar Olkara asked. My computer is unable to find a point of origin. Everyone, order your computers to trace the vector trails of the missiles. If I'm right, then there's one of those black ships prowling the battlefield, the same kind that was hunting down the royal yacht, Wyatt replied. No need for that, Epsilon 1. I have a visual. Linking feed, New One said, and a moment later a small window on his video feed showed the inky black hull of the black ship that was only visible thanks to the barely noticeable plume of light behind it. Got visual confirmation too, Omicron 3 chimed in, also sharing his video feed. A third one is present, Leopold said, adding a third window depicting the prowling predatory ships. Wyatt narrowed his eyes. The ships were identical to the one he faced before, but smaller. Much smaller than the Corvette class he first encountered. It was smaller than a frigate, but if it shared more than mere design with its larger counterpart, then it was bound to be powerful and highly technologically advanced. Their firepower would be limited by their size, but could prove deadly if they acted recklessly. As luck would have it, he was familiar with their weaknesses somewhat. Listen, everyone, Those damn ships will be fast and highly maneuverable, but their hull and shields must be weak. We have to focus fire on them and... Wyatt ordered. You're not the leader of this wedge, Commoner, Omicron 1 countered. We can discuss that later, Delta 1 interjected. He's the only one who's faced these ships before. He has veterancy, like it or not. Wyatt, what are your orders? Undeterred by the interruption, he answered. Screen those bastards, pick your targets, and stay on them. The closer we are to them, the weaker they'll be. Their strength comes from their stealth capabilities and surprise assaults. I was able to knock one much larger away using a compost container and blow it up on their faces. It caused enough damage for the crew to turn tail and run at the very least. Don't bother using the missiles. They won't lock onto their... Shit! They're firing again. Evasive maneuvers. After that, hunt those bastards down. Don't let them escape for the Principality. For the Principality. Wyatt then focused his attention on fulfilling his duty. Now, with more forewarning, he was able to dodge the missiles headed his way easier than before and intercept the pair heading for Leopold using one of his missiles in turn. Again, they avoided taking casualties and were now closing in to the black ships that, noticing they had been discovered, moved to try and make a run for it. But it was too late for them. If they were anything like the Corvette-class black ship, then these ships would also be capable of keeping up with the Royal Yacht in terms of speed, and seemed to be armed with plenty of missiles despite their relatively small size. Clocking at 200 meters set them between being a patrol gunship and a frigate, but still maneuverable enough to outpace every damn ship in the Principality and dance around them with ease. The outer hull, whatever material it was made of, was delicate, and it prevented the ship from being locked from afar. All things considered, he couldn't help but admire Duke Draymore for getting his hands on such ships. But where did he get them from? I've never heard of stealth ships like that before, Wyatt muttered to himself as he closed into the nearest black ship. They were fast, yes, but they were still no match for a fighter set on hunting an enemy down. Once he was close enough to the ship, his computer confirmed that it had no dedicated PD defenses except for 4 coil gun turrets that proved to be ineffective against the small, nimble fighters. He watched as the black ship targeted by Omicron 3 exploded after being peppered by a barrage of coil gun fire. The second black ship didn't fare much better, and mere minutes later, it was dead in space, drifting aimlessly with its deck destroyed and venting atmosphere from multiple points. That only left the third and final black ship to deal with. Closing in on the objective, four available teammates and poured sustained fire on the ship's engines. It didn't take long for the plume to die out, followed by an explosion that all but tore the ship in half as the bullets punctured its reactor. Those can't be the only ones, Delta 1 said through the radio. Well done, Wyatt. Do you know how to detect them before they engage? No. I don't understand how their stealth systems work, but it is highly effective. How did Duke Draymore and his forces get a hold of vessels like that, and for what purpose? Wyatt questioned himself again, unable to come up with a logical answer, and trying to decipher what role, aside from pursuers and performing ambush tactics, those black ships could provide. Figures. An uneducated commoner can't be trusted with any leadership position, Omicron 1 replied. You can't even answer a trivial question decisively. I'd like to see you come up with an answer yourself, Tayo. New One joined the conversation. Isn't it obvious? That damnable traitor has no honor. Who else but a weakling and a backstabber would make use of shameful ships like these? Omicron 1 replied with not a single ounce of doubt in his statement. Wyatt felt like face-palming at the sheer absurdity of what he'd just heard. Victory cares not about honor, you high and mighty blue blood. Go ahead and fight with honor all you want, but you'll get dead before long and join that petulant idiot of a Bacchus sooner or later, he thought angrily. And at that moment lamented the loss of the 2 pilots that died due to Abacus's wounded pride. Be that as it may, the battle is still raging and we must move to our next objective. Delta 1 cut through before a fight could break out. Wait, I'm getting a report from Commander Redford. Oh no. Another 8 black ships were detected and engaged, including a cruiser-class one. The Pride of Axtal, Raging Absolution, and Justice Herald have been destroyed. Another 2 ships, the Front of Honor and the Peerless Glory, have been crippled. That damn cruiser-class ship wreaked havoc on our formation. 6 of the black ships were destroyed. The cruiser class and the surviving small one have managed to disengage and are running away. Goodness gracious, a cruiser shouldn't move that fast. Where did those come from? They were waiting for us. How could this happen? Wyatt was paying no attention to the discussion taking place as his mind connected the dots. The Kastons' fleet movements now made sense. They were drawing their fleet into an ideal ambush where those black ships were waiting. Expanding his tactical map, he saw that the original Kaston fleet, aside from the now heavily damaged battlecruiser, was either destroyed or crippled. Another dot vanished from his map. A destroyer had been struck down by the largest black ship as it retreated to safety. Computer, calculate that ship's possible vector route and destination. Calculating, the AI replied, and 3 seconds later it showed 4 possible routes, with the most likely being the one closest to his current location. Everyone, head to the marked location, half thrust and with minimal output. They want to play hide and seek? Then so shall we. Sharing possible paths and coordinates, he said, sending the results from his computer with the rest of his comrades. Interesting. What do you have in mind, Epsilon 1? Delta 1 asked. Epsilon, Nu, and Omicron squadrons still have our tactical mines. 8 tactical mines in total. We'll set a trap using the mines to block that vector, and we will lie in wait further out. If that cruiser-class ship heads to that vector, we should be able to cripple it or destroy it. We can't let that thing escape to hound us again if we can help it, Wyatt said, and for once, none argued against him outright. A few seconds of silence later, a voice came through the speakers. And if the mines fail to take it out? Leopold asked. Then we'll use our remaining missiles. We won't be able to lock onto the ship, but we can set them on a predetermined course. Even if the mines fail to take the ship down, they will cause severe damage. The missiles will then either finish the job or ensure that ship won't be a problem in the future. Hopefully, Wyatt said, admitting that his plan was far from perfect, but desperate times called for desperate measures. And if the ship heads to another vector, Omicron 1 countered as the marker for the black ship blinked out. They were now blind to its movements and could only guess. Then our ambush will be for nothing and we return to base. The battle is already over and all we can do now is try and cripple that cruiser, Wyatt said. I've forwarded your plan to Commander Redford. He's giving us the green light to proceed, Delta 1 said. Using missiles as torpedoes? Setting up an ambush against a stealth cruiser using only fighters? You're insane, Wyatt. I'll take that as a compliment, Wyatt replied, portraying a confidence he lacked within himself. As he and the other 12 fighters moved to position, only a single thought crossed his mind. That those black ships were ready and waiting, and that the Kaston fleet, lackluster as it was except for that battle cruiser, was more than ready to sacrifice itself was not a delaying action. It was meant to slow them down and inflict serious casualties. A third of their fleet was now gone, and the survivors were being rescued as well as boarding actions were taken to gain as much information as possible from the high-ranking officers. Frowning, he pondered a dark thought. They were waiting for us. This wasn't just a preemptive measure. That battle cruiser and the number of black ships, there's no way Duke Draymore has that many ships at his disposal. So either he's capable of seeing the future, or there's a traitor in the fleet. Chapter 9. In Wyatt's opinion, the worst part about ambushes was the unsteady waiting. Every second felt like it could stretch into hours, while at the same time passing faster than the blink of an eye. The only thing around him was the cold silence, that maddening companion that could drive anyone into making a hasty, thoughtless action. After placing the mines on the vector trail, all fighters pulled back to create a bubble around the area, safely far away from the mine's possible blast radius and that of the black cruiser if they were lucky enough to destroy it outright. Each 20-meter-long fighter floated suspended in space several kilometers apart from each other, but within near instantaneous communication. Though at that moment it didn't matter. They were dead in space with only life support systems active. Unless the cruiser directly set its scanners in their direction, the sensors wouldn't detect them without any form of radio or heat signatures. A part of me wants to be wrong and return base. But if it comes this way, then we have to take it out or cripple it. This is my first real battle, and yet it feels no different than the odd patrol routes back in the academy. What did that one idiot instructor say? Ambush tactics may be useful, but they are dishonorable. A true pilot should never use them willingly. An open engagement is always the honorable thing to do, he thought silently, smiling at the pleasant memory of him beating said instructor by being stealthy and ambushing him over and over again until she finally conceded defeat. Heh, that got me a week's worth of cleaning duty, but seeing her enraged face was so worth it. I will never understand why most nobles believe that trickery, ambush, stealth, and deception are unworthy or dishonorable in combat, yet they happily use them everywhere else. You either win or you die in a battle. Simple as that. Pirates and the Drazen sure as hell don't care about being honorable. Wyatt sighed, checking his vitals and the life support system for the umpteenth time in what felt like 5 minutes. Dark scenarios played across his mind, picturing the black ship appearing suddenly only to destroy them all in a counter-ambush. The idea of his homeworld, Volantis, falling into infighting sent shivers down his spine. Whatever would happen to his brother, to his parents, what about his neighbors? The kind old lady that always fed the local galas, the grump old fart that was Mr. Warlow, always complaining about the nobility but ready to share some of his homemade meals with everyone. Would the local shelter have to close because of tax increases? Would conscription be enforced? Stop thinking about it, Wyatt. Stop it, he muttered to himself, hands shaking slightly. They'll do their part. They'll survive. Trust the prince. Duke Draymore will be defeated, and peace will come back to the principality. They'll be fine. They'll be fine. This isn't a civil war. Yet, he grumbled, clenching his teeth tightly. Why must you always be such a damn pessimist? He asked no one. Then he chuckled darkly. No, I'm a realist. I'll leave the doom and gloom thinking to someone else. Until things become clear, I'll do my best to aid the prince in achieving victory. But I do wonder, though, why did Duke Draymore stage a coup in the first place? Most nobles are power-hungry, glory-seeking, and self-righteous by nature, but Duke Draymore was always portrayed as a level-headed noble. He asked himself, then shrugged 10 seconds later. It doesn't matter now. All that matters is stopping him as soon as possible. His eyes wandered to his black tactical display. Eyes narrowed. Pride of Axtell. I saw that name once or twice in Commander Redford's reports. A heavy destroyer, if I remember correctly. What were they trying to achieve? Humming deeply, he crossed his arms. I'm sure the prince is going to order boarding teams to capture any survivors and find out how and why there were so many ships waiting for the fleet's arrival. With any luck, he won't blame me for this debacle, and if he does, well, I just hope it ends quickly. Several more minutes passed in relative silence as he tried his best to remain focused and calm until the AI chimed. Alert! Proximity sensors have detected a faint heat signature approaching quickly. Wyatt felt his heart jump to his throat as he placed his hands on the controllers. Activate external cameras only. Focus on the heat signature, he ordered. And a few seconds later, his display monitor showed the smooth black exterior of the black ship that faintly reflected the light of the distant star, masking it as a mere reflection to all but those who knew what they were looking for. He stared at the 3-kilometer-long ship with apprehension. Despite its size and mass, it was still relatively sleek, shaped in that now familiar arrowhead design. Even the powerful engines that propelled it forward were barely detected by his sensors. Silently, he reactivated his tactical display to show the ship's vector route, and he smiled when it was still heading in the same direction. It was now the time for the most dangerous part of any ambush, the execution. On his display, the ship moved steadily toward the waiting tactical mines. A scanning sweep would reveal the existence of the mines and the fighters at the distances they were currently at. But scanning something not only required a ship to remain as stationary as possible, it also consumed a lot of energy, computational power, and basically acted as a distress beacon that more or less revealed you were there. Come on, just a little closer, keep moving, Wyatt muttered, eyes glued to the display, refusing to blink. Then, all as one, the tactical mines activated and detonated all around the cruiser. The intense brightness of the explosions reflected on the ship's black hull until the ship flew past the lingering clouds of plasma and energy left behind by the mine's detonation. The ship was visibly heavily damaged, as several hull breaches could be seen across its structure. Atmosphere and internal fires were being sucked into the vacuum of space as it moved, and its engines were considerably weakened, but not disabled. All squadrons, engage, Delta One ordered as communications returned. With a single command, Wyatt brought his fighter to life in full and turned to pursue the ship. The mines didn't slow it down. Nothing would until something forced the ship to slow down or was captured in the gravitational pull of a stellar body. But now it would be unable to keep its acceleration up anymore. Even better, the explosions had forced it out of its original route, making its escape an even less likely scenario. Epsilon Squadron, prepare your missiles for a volley, Wyatt ordered as he ran quick calculations that would hit the damaged ship without the need to lock onto it. New One reporting, we're ready. Omicron 1 here, ready. This is Delta 1. On your word, Epsilon 1. Wyatt felt his throat dry all of a sudden as the idea of sinking the ship crossed his mind. He'd killed before, pirates mostly, and a few Drazan raiders, and he shed no tears for them. But this was different. How many people were on that ship? How many had died already because of his plan? How many more would die? Hundreds? Thousands? Epsilon 5 reporting, Lieutenant. Ready to fire, Noltar Okara said. This is Epsilon 3. Ready. Leopold Dakar's voice came through a second later. Wyatt shook his head, dispelling his doubts. The nobles and commoners aboard were his enemies. They sided with Duke Draymore, and thus they were traitors to the Principality and the Prince. He wasn't stupid either. He knew that most commoners aboard the cruiser, and in every other enemy ship for that matter, were only following orders, unable or unwilling to go against their superiors, or, like himself, found themselves embroiled by forces beyond their control. But like them, he had a duty to uphold, vows to honor, and orders to follow. It wasn't personal nor vindictive. It was simply the nature of battle. One side wins, the other side loses. You either live or you die. Volley! He commanded, and the missiles were released. He watched from the tactical display as the volley of missiles lunged forth unimpeded and without changing direction. All the while, he and what remained of the wedge moved in random directions outside the range of any possible PD turrets and other countermeasures the cruiser was equipped with. A wise choice, for as soon as the missiles entered the effective range of the cruiser's theoretical defenses, Wyatt detected no less than 20 PD turrets coming to life across the undamaged hull's structure. A dozen counter missiles were also launched, but explosions followed soon after from the launch tubes. The tactical mines had done their job and had vastly limited the capabilities of the cruiser. And yet what survived made his stomach clench in worry. I would not want to fight one of those things head on. Not by a long shot, he said as he noticed that the cruiser fired almost blindly at the incoming barrage. 26 Hawk missiles turned into 20 and then 16 before they reached their destination and impacted the damaged cruiser. 2 missiles missed entirely, veering off into space until they detonated once their fuel ran out. From his monitor display, the hull was lit again in the light of explosions that further wounded the ship. One explosion, though, outshone the rest, and a good chunk of the ship suddenly disappeared in a great ball of fire and superheated metal. One of the missiles had entered through one of the gaping holes on the cruiser and had struck an ammo storage unit. The cruiser's engines died, and the ship stumbled freely across the cosmos like a corpse. Delta One, should we move in and finish the job? Wyatt asked, relieved and happy that his plan had worked as well as it did. No, I won't risk it. We don't have any missiles left, and we don't know if they are just playing dead, waiting for us to come in close. I'm trying to scan that monster, but my targeting and sensor arrays bounce off its hull even as damaged as it is now. Where did that treacherous bastard find these ships anyway? I've heard of stealth ships before, but nothing like this, Delta One replied. Then what are we to do, Delta One? Omicron One asked. With that thing out of the way, I can contact Commander Redford, and then he'll decide what to do next. I'm sure he'll want to send a boarding party over and find out. Delta One's words died in his throat when every display monitor was suddenly illuminated by a large explosion that gave Gintrax a second star for a few seconds. Cowards! Omicron One shouted. I can't blame their tactic. Standard procedure. Better to scuttle the ship than be captured, New One said, frustration evident in his voice. At least we achieved our objective.
Hush.
That ship won't trouble us in the future anymore, but who knows how many more are out there. Duke Draymore can't have that many stealth ships at his disposal. With any luck, we took down the strongest of those black ships. This attack was meant to cripple our fleet as much as possible, Wyatt replied. Your orders, Delta One? I'm forwarding the result of the ambush to Commander Redford and awaiting further instructions, Delta One replied. 2 minutes passed in relative silence until he spoke up again. We are to return to base. The first thing Wyatt noticed when they were close enough to the fleet was the sorry state it was in. A third of it was gone, and another third showed damage that ranged from light to heavy. He allowed himself a sigh of relief when he noticed no damage whatsoever had been inflicted upon the exalted virtue. Moving to the hangar bay, one by one, the surviving fighters landed safely as mechanics and engineers moved it to repair any damage taken and run diagnostics. Unhooking his helmet and opening the cockpit, he received a message from Redford. Wyatt, Captain Salazar Reed is heading to the hangar. Do not fall to any provocations. I am on my way. Wyatt suppressed a growl of annoyance, but was thankful that Commander Redford had warned him. I bet the captain will try to blame me for the actions of that idiot. Wouldn't be the first time I'm used as the scapegoat for some petulant noble's misdeeds. Let's get this over with. As he stepped out of his fighter and joined the rest of his squadron, lining in wait for the commanding officer to render a personal report, he saw a fuming, brown-haired man in his 50s, his dull gray eyes showing nothing but contempt and fury as he approached, flanked by a detachment of Marines behind him. His uniform gave away that he was with the Marines, and he was not happy at all. Sparing a quick glance at his comrades, Wyatt saw that they were not at all surprised to see the man heading their way. Ensign Gregor Undaj was the shortest of the group. His slightly grayish hair and his chubby physique made him look unthreatening, but his posture was firm and proud. Warrant Officer Leopold Dakar had short black hair, his eyes brown, as he was a commoner like he was, and was pretty average in both appearance and build, though the nasty scar on his neck and left cheek was pretty notable. Finally, Ensign Nultar Okara. His hair was shoulder-length and with a greenish hue. He wasn't particularly handsome either, as his factions were sturdy and devoid of any grace, but the smirk on his lips and his posture were more relaxed than the rest. Lieutenant Wyatt Staples, Captain Salazar Reed called a good 10 meters away, gaining some attention as he stepped forth with heavy, angry stomps. Sir, Wyatt saluted, followed by his companions. The 2 surviving pilots from New Squadron, the 3 from Omicron, and the 4 from Delta also saluted, but kept their mouths shut, watching in silence. Explain to me why my younger brother is dead, Salazar demanded, throwing any sort of protocol out the airlock. Your idiotic and lackluster commanding skills have caused my noble house dearly. Explain yourself now, commoner filth. Sir, Wyatt replied, not bending nor backing away from the accusation. Inside, he was fuming, but it was a manageable anger. He'd dealt with stupid accusations before, though none involved a dead noble. I regret to inform you that I did everything in my power to prevent the unauthorized and disruptive actions of Abacus Reed. Alas, the sub-lieutenant did not heed my orders and acted on his own accord, sir, said the lieutenant, putting extra emphasis on Abacus's faults. Salazar gritted his teeth and clenched his fists in rage. Liar! My brother would never do something so stupid as to break formation. Surely you ordered him to perform a suicidal action? See? This is what happens when an unworthy commoner is given any sort of important leadership position. Abacus should have been the leader of your squadron after the death of the previous leader, but no. He was disgraced and shoved aside in favor of a commoner that got him killed. I shall not stand for this insolency. You shall be severely punished for the disgrace and dishonor you've brought upon the noble house Reed, Wyatt Staples. Even though he couldn't see them, he knew that the other pilots were likely biting down their tongues. Noble standing and military rank made for a convoluted mess of protocols, honorifics, rules, and exceptions that he couldn't be bothered to learn whatsoever. But he knew that no one was allowed to speak out against an officer of higher standing, much less so a noble, unless directly spoken to. I tried to save your stupid brother, you arrogant blue blood, but I have to stall for time now. What can I do? Wyatt thought, and a second later an idea popped into his head. Falling to a knee, he bowed his head before the Salazar. I dare not insult you or your noble house, Lord, but I must object to your decisions, Lord, he said, avoiding saying threats. Your brother, Sub-Lieutenant Abacus Reed, acted on his own accord and against my orders. His actions caused the deaths of 2 pilots from New Squadron, and all of us have both visual and audio recordings to prove that what I say is true, Lord. I once more lament the loss of a precious life of House Reed, but I am faultless in this regard, Lord. You won't get more than that from me, you damnable blue blood. Your stupid brother killed 2 other good pilots and nearly cost us more. You and that worthless pride and ego will have to accept reality, he thought, never allowing his feelings to show. Falsehood, surely, Salazar replied with a growl. Then again, what can anyone expect from a lowly commoner? You know nothing of the virtues of honor, glory, and respect. I shall have you flogged for daring to lie to me. He's not lying, Reed. The voice of Nulter Olkara suddenly cut through, and all eyes shifted to him. Your stupid brother couldn't handle being under the command of a commoner and got himself killed, taking another 2 with him for it. Olkara, you dare insult the memory of my brother in such a manner? Salazar countered, fuming and ready to throw a punch. What's more, you dare speak out of turn and to a superior officer? How am I to do otherwise when your claims are not only unjust but false? We have the evidence, we have recordings. Accept reality and swallow your pride for once, Reed, Nultar said, eyes narrowing. Then he smirked mockingly. Not that you much of it in the first place, now is it? Wyatt stared dumbly at the interaction of the 2 nobles. He'd seen a few confrontations before, but none had been so brazen as the one happening before his eyes. As soon as Salazar reached for his holstered pistol, though, his escort tensed, and Nultar's eyes focused on the offended noble. Commander on deck, a voice announced. Like that, every shred of hostility was dispelled as Salazar had to turn around to salute Commander Redford, flanked by 2 Marines. At ease, Redford commanded, and everyone obeyed. Captain Salazar, may I inquire why you're hounding one of my pilots? Commander Redford, Salazar began, undeterred but showing respect to his superior. Lieutenant Wyatt's actions resulted in the death of my brother. I claim retribution by right of honor. Denied. Redford's single utterance was heavy and left no room for debate. My lord, Salazar insisted, a commoner has caused the death of a noble. He must be punished, and I request to be the one carrying the sentence as the affected party. Captain Reed, I have already read the report and reviewed the footage sent, not by Lieutenant Wyatt's feed, but by the Wedge commander, Lieutenant Commander Siegfried Now. Your brother acted out of pride and a wounded ego, Captain Reed. It led to his demise and that of 2 more pilots. Wyatt's timely order to retreat before your brother's rushed and pig-headed actions went to fruition saved more lives. Henceforth, your requests are denied and barred. This conflict is over. Normally, such actions would receive a penalty to the House. However, given the circumstances, I am willing to forego disgracing your family's name as a reward for your loyal service. Salazar Reed closed his eyes, teeth gritted, and bowed his head once. Understood, Commander Redford. I accept your verdict. House Reed nor I shall pursue this issue further. Splendid. Redford Kalen placed a hand on the captain's shoulder and offered a friendly smile that was anything but. Word of advice, Captain. If a similar incident were to ever happen again, remember your division and report any grievances to your commander. Avoid bringing shame to your family yourself. I understand, Commander. Forgive me. I have duties to attend to, said the captain as a saving face measure and then departed. Wyatt, though, was smiling internally. Oh, that was beautiful. I've never seen a tongue lashing so satisfactory since I was in the academy. Best part was that I wasn't the target of said lashing. Ha ha! Take that, your high and mighty pain in my ass, he thought with gusto while maintaining a stoic expression, or as stoic as he could manage it. With that done, Wyatt stood up and gave his commanding officer a crisp salute. At ease, Lieutenant Wyatt, Redford ordered. I've reviewed the report given to me by Lieutenant Commander Siegfried Now, and I must congratulate you for your successful kill, Lieutenant Wyatt. That stealth cruiser destroyed 3 of our ships before we could react to its presence and ran away before we could counterattack. That ship won't be the last of our problems, but it is a victory nevertheless that it was destroyed. Commander Redford, everyone in our wedge contributed to its destruction. It was not my kill alone, Wyatt retorted seriously. Redford nodded once. Indeed. But it was your plan that brought its demise. Everyone shall receive a skull as proof of your veterancy. However, you are to receive the most credit for it. He placed a hand on Wyatt's shoulder and patted him twice. Be proud of your achievements, Wyatt. Now rest. All of you, he said, turning to face the rest of the pilots present. I have other wedges to see, but be ready. Boarding teams are already on the surviving enemy ships, and it will be some time before they are done. Sir, all the pilots present said in unison, and saluted again before Redford moved to another section of the hangar. Once he was gone, the small crowd that had formed dispersed, and the pilots finally relaxed. What were you thinking, Noltar? Do you want to get yourself killed or what? Leopold asked, punching Noltar's shoulder. Gregor rolled his eyes. It's not like I have much to live for as it is, Leo. Besides, Salazar got that coming. We all know Abacus let Tristan die just so he could take his place. I would have killed the bastard myself, but hey, he did us a favor. Shame about the other two guys, Noltar answered, arms crossed. You still took a high risk, Noltar. Abacus surely deserved to pay for his crime, but you just don't talk to a superior like that, Gregor said, checking his suit and then pointing at Wyatt. Even Wyatt here knows better than actively antagonize those of higher standing. I merely spoke the truth, Wyatt remarked. Huh, they are more relaxed than I thought they would be. At least now I have yet another reason to don't feel any pity for that idiot's death, he thought, sitting on a large crate, joining his comrades. Excellent work out there, though. Shame I couldn't stick to the end. Sounds like hunting that black ship was a highlight of this battle, Gregor lamented. You know, I had my doubts about you, Wyatt. But after today, I think you'll make a good squadron leader. Same, Leopold added, smiling. Now I'm not the only commoner in the squad. Although that's not saying much since you're kinda like a pseudo-noble, Staples. Wyatt huffed. Please, we both know that's hardly the case. But hey, the prince has more siblings in danger. Save one and you may get a promotion too, Wyatt replied, relaxing a bit more. Gregor and Leopold chuckled, while Noltar merely stared at him with curious eyes. Thank you for trying to defend me, Ensign Noltar. I agree with your companions that your actions were reckless, but your sentiment is appreciated. Noltar nodded. No need to thank me, Lieutenant. Any reason to see a Reed get what they deserve is enough to make me happy. Helping out was just a happy coincidence, he chuckled. You may not recognize me, but I also participated in the competition. I can finally congratulate you on your victory. Excellent performance, he said, offering a hand. Wyatt stared at his outstretched hand and then up to him again. You're a noble, are you not? Noltar rolled his eyes and brusquely took Wyatt's right hand and squeezed it, shaking it firmly. Disgraced noble, technically speaking. I know commoners and nobles aren't supposed to shake hands, but hey, who cares if I do it? Pleased to meet you, Wyatt Staples. The pleasure is mine, Noltar Olkara, Wyatt replied, surprised but pleasantly so. He then stretched a hand to Leopold once Noltar released it. The two shook hands in silence. Then he turned to Gregor, but was unsure if he would accept his gesture or not. Deciding for the latter, he nodded once. Cautious, Gregor said, returning the nod. I can respect that. Just admit that you have your head up your ass already, Gregor. Leopold barked out a laugh. We've been in the squad for over 2 years, and he's never once shook my hand. Not even after I saved his life back in Honduras 5. Nobles, am I right? Excuse me, Gregor said, offended. Has your commoner brain finally rotted? I believe it was I who saved your worthless life in that battle. In your dreams, perhaps, Undaj. Or did you get banged in the head good this time? Leopold countered. Wyatt could only stare as the two pilots started to go back and forth, claiming feats and insulting each other at every turn. And yet, none of it sounded malicious or cruel. Are they always like that? He asked softly. Better get used to it, Lieutenant. Once they start, very little can shut them up, Noltar answered. Wyatt nodded in response and waited for further orders, whatever those may be. Don't get attached to them, Wyatt. You might die, or they might die in the coming conflicts. Better to keep them at arm's length. Chapter 10. The hot water of his shower hit his skin, shedding the tension and stress away from his body. Commander Redford had dismissed every fighter pilot after 3 long hours of waiting. The boarding parties had been successful in capturing several officers and securing a couple hundred commoner crewmen, who had surrendered and even aided the boarders. Everyone else would be summarily executed for their treason once the salvage efforts were over. All of them would either be spaced or simply destroyed alongside their now useless ships. It was a harsh decision, but one that he could understand. The fact that the prince himself gave orders to spare those who surrendered reassured him that he was on the right side. But it made the loss of so many lives weigh no less in his mind. Before leaving for his quarters, he heard that the only two support and maintenance corvettes in the fleet were scouring the useful parts of the gutted ships. Hullbreaker teams were hard at work patching the wounds the damaged vessels of the fleet got, and medical rooms were full of wounded, as well as performing funerary rites for those that were lost, both those whose bodies could be recovered and those that couldn't. Turning off the water, he grabbed a towel, dried himself off, and then allowed the drying routine to get everything else and cleanse and shower. Water was precious after all, and needed to be recycled as much as possible in case harvesting was not an option. Stepping out of the shower, he quickly changed into a fresh uniform and sat on his bed, thinking about nothing and everything at the same time. After several minutes of silent contemplation, he glanced at the door. "I guess the prince doesn't believe I'm a traitor," he sighed tiredly. "I don't know what's worse. The chance that Duke Draymore has so much foresight despite the distances at play here, or that there may be one or multiple traitors hiding in the fleet's crew." The thought alone was disconcerting, and opened so many dark possibilities that it made his head spin. And here I am, a mere lowly commoner that can't do anything except shoot things. His stomach chose that moment to rumble. I wish I still had some of those sweets Princess Clara gifted me, he muttered, barely able to stop his mouth from watering. After 2 more minutes of silence, he suddenly stood up and cracked his neck. "Since I was dismissed, that means I can do whatever I want. If that's the case, then I'll make the most out of it and go to the training chambers. Now that I can use them, there's no excuse to not sharpen up my skills, right?" His question went unanswered. His trip took only a few minutes, and when he arrived, he found the place busier than usual. Several judging eyes fell upon him, and murmurs became more prevalent. Mixed within those glares, there were also eyes of approval and even some mild admiration. It was an odd mix, but the latter was surpassed by the former. Still, he found an available chamber and opened it. He was about to enter it when a hand grabbed his shoulder and shoved him aside, almost making him tumble. Turning quickly, he saw that a tall, black-haired man had been the one responsible. His tank insignia put him as a lieutenant commander, a noble. "I'm terribly sorry, Lord. Did you want to use the chamber yourself?" Wyatt asked, saluting the noble in question, while his mask was strong, hiding his annoyance. The noble in question lost the smug smile he had after hearing his response and turned to face him. "So you are Wyatt Staples. You are lackluster, to say the least. I was expecting someone more statuesque, impressive, in words you can understand, for someone who has gained so much attention since your promotion. I believe I am at folly for expecting anything dignified from a mere commoner. I am not surprised in the least by your persona, Wyatt Staples. And you're not exactly a shining beacon of exemplar model either, Blue Blood," he thought, his mask never crumbling. "I aimed not to fill expectations, Lord. I am a simple pilot, nothing more, nothing less. Am I excused, or does your lordship require something of me? I have orders to complete a series of simulations, Lord." Technically a lie, but hey, he doesn't have to know that. Seemingly frustrated, the noble, who was a good head taller than him, leaned over, making use of his bulkier frame in an attempt to intimidate him. "Be aware of this, commoner. Many of us know what you're up to, but you will fail. Remember that. We are watching, and we do not like filthy, opportunistic upstarts. Now get out of my sight before I remove you myself, commoner." Wyatt bowed his head once, saluted again, and moved to another training chamber without uttering a single word, only to be rebuked a dozen more times by nobles of various ranks and divisions. Finally, he got into a training chamber after 10 minutes of searching and waiting. As he sat down and the neural link was created, his mask broke and his expression turned sour. "At least now I have more motivation to tear up things in the simulation," he whispered to himself, gripping his handles tightly. "Upstart? My plan? Are all nobles that insecure about their positions and the standing of their houses? Who am I kidding? Of course they are. So it's not just a wounded pride I'm dealing with, but they see me as a threat, and they farted up me as some kind of master manipulator in their heads? He said, each word laced with disdain. I don't know if I should laugh or find it flattering that they see me like that. Do you want to know what my plan is? Oh, high and mighty nobles, he said as he clicked on a random simulation. He was too annoyed to care at the moment. My plan is to survive, aid the prince, restore order across the principality, and carry out my military career until I can retire. I don't care about whatever your imaginations scrounge up. Letting a final growl, the simulation started. As luck would have it, it was an open battle. That is unfortunate to hear, the prince said, pinching the bridge of his nose in frustration. Are you certain nothing more could be extracted? Lukacs Ishtal, commander of the intelligence division, shook his head, sharing the frustration of the prince. Regrettably, our assumption that the rightful path was commanded by a main bloodline Caiston, possibly the heir himself, was wrong. The rightful path was commanded by Baron Linaro Caiston, second bloodline but nowhere near high enough on their succession ladder. He scoffed. That damnable Caiston knew next to nothing, and the systems within their ship were purged utterly. What little information we could extract from the other ships is useless. The only thing of worth that the captured prisoners revealed was that they didn't know about the black ships being in the system, except the cruiser that was destroyed. Their orders were to engage and harass us at maximum range. They were used as decoys to allow the black ships the chance to pounce on us. Which, I must admit, was more than successful, Admiral Damien Balto said in no uncertain terms. Every ship targeted was a ship of the line. That leaves us with only 3 ships as the fighting backbone of our fleet. 2 destroyers and the exalted Virtue itself. The rest are support, cargo, and transport vessels. Defended, armed, and ready to provide light assistance, but nothing more. It is imperative that we travel to House Finnegan territory as soon as possible, my prince. I concur with our esteemed Admiral, Vivian Terabas, commander of the logistical division, said, gaining the attention of her fellow commander, the Admiral, Princess Clara, and the Prince. The supplies we picked on Faldo are intact, and our transport shuttle suffered no significant damage. However, we lack ships. We need more, and we need any spare equipment we can salvage if we are to see Marchioness Amelia Finnegan. We don't know if another assault is being prepared by the traitors, or if they have the capabilities to do so soon. We are almost blind and deaf thanks to the jamming outposts of House Caiston. Once we leave Ginny's, we will know more about the current situation across the Principality. For now, I suggest that we conscript the best and most capable civilian-grade ships in this woodshaft. Perhaps there will be mercenaries we can call to arms. Gregor Lintar, commander of the Communications Division. I believe we don't have an alternative in this case, as much as it pains me to admit it, Commander Redford said, looking at the prince. We lack fighters, my prince. We have many pilots, and despite our recent losses, some of which are more regrettable than others, my fighters are ready to fight for you until the end. Nevertheless, we can't rely on them to bring us victory without proper support and numbers at our side. Juliana Winfield, commander of the Marines Division, nodded in agreement. My Marines are eager and ready. The boarding assaults only saw a few deaths among the commoner auxilia, and just 2 proper Marines fell in the process. For proper assaults against traitor stations and, Prince forbid, battleships, I will need more. The prince wore an unreadable expression before giving his answer. I was afraid that was the case. This ambush cost us dearly. But between the black ships destroyed and the battlecruiser, we inflicted more damage to them than they did to us. Redford, I take it your report was correct and was in no way motivated by favoritism? He asked, though he already knew that wasn't the case. Redford nodded once and noted that George Lintar, William Hempstroke, commander of the Mechanized Division, and Frederick Anderson, commander of the Infantry Division, tensed slightly. His other fellow commanders, except for Juliana, remained stoic and focused on their respective duties. Even Hannah Talaro, commander of the Royal Orbital Strike Forces, or ROSF for short, only allowed herself a short chuckle. But while brief, he caught that botch Clara and Cynthia perked up, just enough to let his trained eye notice the minute changes in their expressions. They had read his report already, he was sure of it. My liege, I assure you that my report is as clear to the factual evidence as possible. To ensure veracity, only the perspective of Lieutenant Wyatt Staples was not taken into account. All relevant information was gathered through the footage, recording, and testimonies from the surviving members of the wedge he was part of. Level-headed and direct, yet cautious and decisive? You were not exaggerating when you described him as a paradox, Redford, Juliana commented. I am starting to regret not extending a formal invitation for him to join my house as a night upon his arrival. Wyatt Staples certainly has talent. He is resourceful and a quick thinker. I shall grant him that much praise, said the bald commander with a tiny smirk across her lips. But is he loyal? How do we know he didn't lie to the prince and set us upon this ambush? George countered, hiding his disdain behind a curtain of suspicion. He was directly responsible for the destruction of that stealth cruiser, George. I don't trust the boy in any regard just yet, but even I can see that in such an accusation he is faultless, William replied, crossing his arms. You seem quite certain of that decision, William, Frederick countered. Oh, sure. A commoner warrant officer hauling compost is the perfect spy sent to infiltrate our fleet by saving Princess Clara from capture or worse. Faultless strategy. Exceptional foresight on the part of Duke Cornelius Draymore. Rely on a commoner who knew nothing of the coup in the first place. I can't see any flaws in such a stratagem, Hannah replied, her mocking tone thick and steady. Enough, the prince said tiredly. Lieutenant Wyatt Staples performed admirably during this battle, and if nothing else, it confirms that his victory in the competition was not a fluke. Turning his gaze to Redford, he continued. If need be, take him under your direct care. Do not coddle him, but ensure that he remains strong and loyal. Not only has he earned a personal debt on my behalf, but his talents must not be wasted. We will need all the exceptional, loyal, and talented people we can gather, regardless of status or origin. Loyalty is its own reward. Loyalty is its own reward, everyone muttered after the prince. With that cleared, let us discuss the next topic of interest. Woodshaft and our next actions. I will be blunt. We will need to conscript ships and quite possibly take with us many of their mechanics, engineers, menial staff, extra supplies, and local law enforcement equivalent to bolster our ranks. I will, however, forbid any hostile actions to be taken that are not in self-defense. His expression hardened, showing his burning determination. I will avoid butchering my people as much as possible. Our enemy is Duke Draymore and his conspirators. Remember that, everyone. Everyone was silent for several seconds until Clara spoke up. Brother dearest, she began, I believe I can help you in this regard. If you are to permit me to solve this problem within my capabilities, then I shall arrange a satisfactory, mutually beneficial exchange. The prince stared at his sister for several seconds, processing her request and offer. He glanced at Cynthia, who stood behind her. The blue-haired woman slowly blinked in response. The prince hummed deeply and straightened himself. Very well. You have free rein, Clara. Do what you must. Your orders shall be like my own. Clara bowed her head. Thank you, brother dearest. With a smile, she stood up. Apologies, but I must retire now. I have much to think about, much to plan and organize, and little time. Juliana and Redford exchanged a glance, confused. Wyatt Staples was immersed in the simulation, grinning madly as he took down his 20th Drazan fighter alongside a full wing. He wasn't the leader either, not even the leader of a squadron. He was a mere pilot doing his best to win the battle and avoid being taken down. Suddenly, just as he was about to add another tally to his score, the simulation paused and a familiar voice called within his mind. Wyatt, Princess Clara summons you. Met me in the hangar in 5 minutes. Do not be late, Cynthia ordered. Then, she added, do not forget about your training. I have not. It shall be resumed without fail. Is it too late to choose desertion? He muttered as the simulation resumed, only for him to be destroyed a few seconds later. Chapter 11. Of all the things Wyatt was expecting to see upon arriving at the hangar, seeing 30 Marines lining up before a shuttle was at the bottom of his list. Locating Cynthia proved to be an easy task. As he approached, he noticed that her posture was firmer than the previous times he'd seen her. Is she preparing to board a ship? He asked himself as the presence of the Marines left little room to think of anything else. I thought the boardings were already over. Do they need me to escort the shuttle? Cynthia turned to him as he entered her field of view, making him uneasy. He still wasn't used to her firm gaze, and her features clashed against her attitude fiercely. Still, he stopped a few steps in front of her and saluted. Lieutenant Wyatt Staples reporting, Lady Cynthia. Cynthia nodded once. Good. Captain Milcades, you may commence, she ordered, and the Marine at the head of the formation simply made a hand gesture. A moment later, the group of Marines began boarding the shuttle. Congratulations are in order, Lieutenant Wyatt. Taking down a cruiser is no easy feat for a group of fighters. Less so when dealing with ships and enemies that we know little about. It was a team effort, Lady Cynthia. I thank you for your praise, nevertheless, Wyatt replied cordially before taking a moment to see the Marines. May I ask which ship is to boarded, Lady Cynthia? None, came her dry, on-point reply. None, Wyatt repeated, confused. Am I not here to act as an escort for your shuttle? He asked, sparing only a quick glance at the sidearm hanging from her waist and the sword strapped on her back. You are here to fly the shuttle, Cynthia replied as the passenger door closed and sealed itself. Come, we take the front. I obey, said Wyatt, puzzled and surprised by her answer. With no other choice to make, he followed Cynthia to the front section of the shuttle. The two entered the cockpit. Although he wasn't sure if calling it a cockpit was the right word for it. The shuttle was larger than his old hauler, since it was more of a troop carrier than anything else, but in design was similar if only more pleasing to look at, and more advanced. The cockpit was as large as his quarters, and he was certain it was larger by a good amount, and there were 8 available seats to take, 2 for the pilot and co-pilot if need be, and 6 for other important passengers. His mouth ran dry when he saw the beautiful blonde princess sitting in one of the passenger seats not wearing her elegant dress. Instead, she was wearing an armor set similar to the one Cynthia was wearing, but purple in color, matching her eyes. Unlike the blue-haired bodyguard, she carried no weapons, and a helmet laid peacefully in her lap. His cheeks blushed when she noticed their arrival and offered him a pleasant, friendly smile. Immediately after, he bowed his head. My princess, he greeted and moved to the pilot seat, sitting on it without hesitation while the door closed and hissed, sealing them entirely. The next few minutes passed in silence while he ran diagnostics, checked the integrity of the outside cameras, and waited for the mechanics and technicians to give him the clear for takeoff. Are you always so quiet, Wyatt? Clara asked softly all of a sudden. Only when performing routine diagnostics, Clara, Wyatt replied curtly. Several seconds of silence passed until Clara spoke up again. Does my presence make you nervous, Wyatt? What do you expect me to answer? Yes, of course you're making me nervous. For starters, why are you here? Why am I here to fly this shuttle? Where are you going? What's with the Marines? Knowing what's going on usually helps, you know. He thought in a panic, but his face remained professional. Never, Clara. I'm just surprised and confused as to how am I to serve you. Clara let out a dignified huff. Please, Wyatt, you don't have to be so formal, remember? I'd like to believe that we can be friends, or at least be friendly to each other. In that case, he swallowed nervously. Clara, what's going on? I'm very confused. Secrecy is always necessary in the world of royalty and nobility, Wyatt. Every action has to be taken to ensure a modicum of style, presence, and deniability all packaged into a single moment. It can be tiring and absurd, but, as I stated earlier, necessary, she revealed with her same friendly yet serious tone. Cynthia, if you will. Cynthia approached and handed Wyatt a small tablet. Follow these coordinates. Take us in at regular speed, she ordered. Wyatt took the tablet and immediately read through the information presented on it. It was a navigation path leading to Woodshaft that avoided a clear route from the fleet itself. It would mask their arrival as merely one more of the dozens of ships heading there or already docked at the station. She wants to go there? Why? Wyatt pondered as some questions were answered, but others formed. Bowing his head, he uttered, I obey, and took his position on the pilot seat. Cynthia sat next to Clara and waited for the technicians to finish their jobs. Half a minute later, he was given the clear to depart, and so he brought the engine to life. 2 minutes later, the shuttle was far away from the exalted Virtue and the rest of the fleet itself. Silently, Wyatt punched in the coordinates for the first point and relaxed in his seat, keeping an eye over the sensor monitor just in case. Now that we are away from unwanted ears and eyes, Clara began, her voice relaxed and holding a tone similar to the one she had during their private chat. Wyatt, humor me if you will. Ask and I shall answer, Clara, he replied, unable to stop himself from feeling relaxed in her presence for some reason. Tell me, what do you think about the battle? What are your honest opinions about it? She asked. Again, this uncertainty. Is she trying to test me, or is she just being friendly? Are all royals like her? I can't read her like I read other nobles. That's downright scary. Focus, Wyatt. Just answer her honestly, Wyatt thought before turning around and allowing the autopilot to take control of the shuttle. That's a difficult question to answer, Clara. But if I am allowed to be completely honest. Clara nodded while Cynthia eyed him closely. There's no way those ships were there by coincidence. It was a trap at worst and a desperate ambush at best. My brother believes the same. So do I, Clara replied. Be assured, Wyatt, that he does not blame you for this assault. The black ships and the battle cruiser were unaccounted factors, but your information was correct regarding everything else. Tell me, Wyatt, what do you believe is the cause for their presence in the first place? Wyatt felt a knot forming in his stomach as words poured out of his mouth. It motivates him, and that Wyatt, yeah, such immaculate foresight and a strategic genius so far beyond our own that fighting him will be pointless, or that there is a traitor in the fleet, possibly more than one fear forces information. He replied, crossing his arms. I pray, and do forgive me for saying this, that we are dealing with the latter. For if it is the former, then we have no hope of success with our limited forces. An astute observation. It is a conclusion.
Open weatherwise.
But I have the benefit of knowing more of my uncle than you.
Open weatherwise.
Duke Cornelius Draymore of Cameron is a great strategist, a veteran soldier, and a superb administrator, but not even he can be everywhere nor account for every possibility. We would not be having this conversation otherwise, Clara replied, sighing tiredly, her eyes reflecting the pain of betrayal and uncertainty. I do not know why he has staged this coup. I doubt it is the thirst for power alone that motivates him and that strikes fear into my heart. Clara, Cynthia said, reaching to hold her friend's hand for a moment. Clara gave her friend a smile.
What's up, everybody?
Take this battle into account. My uncle couldn't order this assault. The distances are too great. We were on the run for nearly 3 weeks before you saved us, Wyatt. There were no communications detected from Faldo, nor any other originating from the fleet itself. And yet we were ambushed. How so? She's right. The fleet has been under a strict communication lockdown ever since we arrived. Common protocol to elude detection for as long as possible. If that's the case, then how could a traitor communicate with others? Wyatt thought about her words long and hard for several moments before he spoke up. The only way a traitor could avoid detection and also give enough time to nearby forces to mobilize would be through the use of a quantum entanglement communicator. But those are ruinously expensive. Clara nodded once. I'm glad to see that you are as intelligent as you are cunning and brave, Wyatt. Yes, that is the only way a traitor could pass on information without our notice. The fleet's communication has been subjected to containment protocols and only ship-to-ship laser communication. Blushing at the praise he got, he continued. A communicator like that can't be easy to hide. And who could even afford one in the first place? Or who could be so deceptive or loyal to the Duke's side to have earned the trust to take one? Are we looking at a single traitor hidden among us, or at multiple ones working in conjunction? He fired question after question, and then he sighed. Just thinking about it makes my head spin. It is a dilemma that we're looking into.
I don't know.
We were expecting traitors within
No.
our ranks, but not in such a manner.
You want pizza?
Admitted. And certainly not to operate with such efficiency.
I guess.
Am I to aid the prince in such a task? He asked tactfully. Unless your direct intervention is needed, then no. Like it or not, Wyatt, you've become a prominent figure within the fleet. Any traitor would steer clear from trying to recruit you to the Duke's side and their cause. Your loyalty has already marked you as innocent in our eyes and a trusted individual we can rely upon. Hence why I requested you to be my pilot during this mission of mine. She finished with a knowing, playful smile. Wyatt bowed his head slightly and chuckled to himself softly. I am honored and humbled to hear that a princess entrusts her safety to a commoner such as I. Think nothing of it, Wyatt, Clara countered with a wave of her hand. Now that such a bothersome topic is out of the way, I shall inform you of the reason I am heading to Woodshaft. Simply put, I shall arrive incognito and arrange a meeting with whoever rules the station. I will then handle negotiations that should gain us as many capable ships, crews, and extra supplies as can be gathered and spared, as well as passage to House Finnegan territory. And you, she said, pointing a dainty armored finger at him, will be our guide. Wyatt nodded. Makes sense. I'm the only one in the fleet who even knows about Woodshaft. I shall do everything in my power to aid you, Clara. I am pleased to hear that, Wyatt. You can begin by telling us why the station is called Woodshaft in the first place, she asked, leaning in curiously. Next to her, Cynthia shook her head while a faint smile spread across her lips. It's not an exciting story, but I obey, replied the lieutenant. Over 1,000 years ago, there was a military station that was decommissioned but never dismantled. A group of pirates called the Woodshaft Plunderers took over the station and turned it into their base of operations. They thought that, since the station was there to oversee the common exit and entry FTL jump points between Caiston and Finnegan territories, then they could get a fortune by performing repeated raids on passing cargo freighters and other ships. They were right, but not in the usual way pirates tend to operate. I thought you said Woodshaft wasn't a pirate den, Cynthia remarked, crossing her arms. Don't jump to conclusions so easily, Cynthia. Let him finish. Go on, Wyatt, Clara interjected, eagerly waiting for him to continue. Nodding and smiling internally at Cynthia's impatient outburst, he continued. Turns out that the reason the military station was decommissioned was because the threat of Drazen raids had been all but neutralized, and more civilian ships could transit the system. More than any pirate group could ever hope to hit. So the leader at the time decided that instead of raiding ships, they would simply demand a toll for safe passage. It worked. A little too well, in fact. Within 2 years, the pirate group disbanded and instead became a criminal syndicate that focused on smuggling, trafficking, and information brokerage. The name Woodshaft stuck around, and as time went by, the syndicate transformed until it also disbanded as they stopped engaging in more criminal. Today, Woodshaft is just a smuggler. A big one, though. A smuggler that sounds more like a regular conversation. Am I to assume that the reason it remains illegal is due to certain products available and the means to acquire them? Clara asked, eyes beaming with curiosity. On that note, how is it possible for this station to be so big without official support from the Principality shipyards? You are correct on that assumption, Clara. And to answer your second question, it is rather simple. They use wrecks, scrap, and other junk to make repairs, keep expanding, and provide a crude anchorage for larger ships, Wyatt added. Cheap, effective, but dangerous, but it works, so there's that. Cynthia frowned. Why has House Caiston not done anything about this woodshaft? Criminality is to be expunged, regardless if they are traitors or not. Voice only the third line. So, ellipsis. We are not alone. So, Apollo, go to channel number miss. Full tap the book of go to paycheck, go to the born, go to rockfall 1_2 vertical line. Meteor impact and survival begins. Vertical line survival apocalypse audiobook 6. Go to channel
Sir?
audiobooks.
Yes, sir. Yeah.
Video player. But headache. Video collapse. Video shorts. Video player. Club. Shorts. Subscriptions. Solution.
Yes. If you just start tuning in, everybody.
Video player, but complete, lackluster as it is, should be more than capable video ending such a video player. I wonder if she's simply put, why should explain overseer, whoever they may be at any given point in time, have a treaty with House Casement. They get a share of the goods and profits, and in turn, they allow Woodshaft to operate freely. Woodshaft isn't defenseless either, but instead of wasting resources and looting a good source of income, illegal as it may be, the Castons and other